All right. So welcome to our Working with Homeland Security on CSEC cases training. So you'll learn about case referrals with HSI and HSI's Prepare and Predict method. So I have a couple of just ground rules for the training. If you are not speaking, please mute yourself. If you're speaking, of course, feel free to unmute and ask questions. I hope that you will. And feel free to write in the chat. I will be monitoring the chat for questions or concerns, anything that you want to bring to the attention of our presenters today. And that is about it. So I will turn it over to our wonderful presenters today, and I'll let them introduce themselves and get started when they are ready to start the presentation.
Thank you so much. All right, let me pull up this PowerPoint. Let's see if I can make this happen. I'm gonna share my screen. There we go. All right, can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent, okay. So thank you so much for coming on and being with us today. We're very, very, very excited. My name is Allie Levy, and thank you for having us, and this is such a privilege. I'm with my two coworkers, Emily and Carly. For many, many years with HSI, I covered the New England area, including Maine, and Emily now sits in Boston, and she covers the entire state of Maine, and Carly is our forensic interviewer in St. Paul, and she can be utilized for backing Emily up, for backing me up, for whatever we need, and she's an excellent interviewer, and we're going to all introduce ourselves as we go through. But let me just tell you a little bit more about what we're here for today, and then we'll get into a little bit more of the introductions. So we want to, the motivation behind doing this today with you guys is obviously Annette and Michelle have talked to us and talked to us what you guys are looking for and what we're looking for, but we want you guys to be able to learn more about our program. What is the HSI Forensic Interviewing Program? Who are we, and how does this work, and how does it work with you? How do we work as a team? We want to work as a multidisciplinary team the best that we possibly can. So while we're getting to know you, we want you to get to know us at the same time. So we want to learn how to work together so that we can better improve the services that we provide to the victims at large. Also, we want you to understand our method. So as forensic interviewers, we have gotten training in national protocols like you have. And but at HSI, we use the Prepare and Predict method. So what we're going to do today throughout the day is we're going to provide to you some instruction on how to use our protocol and and our method and how to basically insert that into what you guys are doing every single day. Okay, so by the end of this presentation, I'm provided with some information on the HSI Forensic Interviewing Program, the role of HSI Forensic Interview Specialists, and techniques for collaboration. You guys will be able to efficiently collaborate as an MDT at the state and federal level. Okay, that's our goal, our primary goal for today. And we're going to do that through these three objectives: getting to know us, getting to know the HSI FIS team that we're talking to today, collaborating with the MDT, which is something that should come super easy for you guys as you guys work with MDTs every single day, and making referrals between the CAC and HSI. What does that look like when a case comes in? And how does that work with making referrals through to the federal partners? Okay, and today we're going to do that through, like I said, getting to know, this is our agenda, the HSI team. You're going to get to know all three of us very, very well. We're going to explore and discuss three goals that we just talked about. We're going to identify ways that we can all work together, share strategies and techniques, and obviously have discussion. We want this to be an open discussion if possible. So go ahead and put things in the chat, and we will make sure that we can answer your questions as we go through. Okay, so we're going to get started with the first objective, which is getting to know the HSI team. So let's go. My name is Allie. It's Alexandra, but everyone calls me Allie. And I sit in Chicago, and I am I love Chicago. It's where I'm from. It's who I am. Okay. And I've been working with HSI, and I came onto HSI in 2009, so 12 years ago, to start the forensic interviewing program. We didn't have a program in HSI. I was desperate for it. And so I came on board, we started the program, and I've been doing that ever since. Prior to that, so I've been there for 12 years. But prior to that, I was a forensic interview specialist in Chicago, and I worked at the Chicago Children's Advocacy Center. I was the manager of the forensic interviewing team and the manager of the interpreting services. And I've been working in the exploitation and abuse field for 22 years. This is my passion. This is what I love, and I hope you'll be able to see that as I'm presenting today and what we see. But it's not all who I am. I'm also, like you might have heard, that I work with the interpreting services. I am Argentinian, and my first language is Spanish. And so I am a bilingual and bicultural forensic interview specialist, and I bring that to the table. And this is my boy, Jameson. He's my big boy, my baby. He's 3 years old, and he's my love. He's everything to me. So I don't have kids, but I have him. And so that's pretty amazing. I will now share the screen with Emily. Emily, go ahead.
Hi guys, good morning. I am so glad to be with you today. As most of you probably know me as an interviewer from Boston, because we would meet routinely as CACs. I am now the person that's covering the Boston AOR, as Ali mentioned, which includes all of the New England states, as well as Maine. Just a little bit about me. I have been a forensic interviewer for 21 years. And previous to HSI, which I've only been with them for about 1.5 years now, I worked in 3 different urban settings, the last one being the Suffolk County Children's Advocacy Center for approximately 15 years. I am a bilingual forensic interviewer. I am Puerto Rican, so my Spanish is a little bit different from Ali's, but it definitely has evolved with time. As you can see, my pride and joy is on the screen. That is my daughter and my son, my daughter is currently 18 and my son is 15. And our youngest, which is our puppy, Flash, who is only 4.1 pounds, by the way, guys. But he has been such a godsend to us during this time. I have had the privilege of working with a lot of the CACs in Maine. I'm so glad to be able to do this. You guys have been so welcoming. Hopefully I'll even recognize some of the faces on the screen. But just like Ali, what I do, I love. And I'm so glad to be a part of it with you guys. Because I acknowledge from my CAC life that, you know what, we work really well together, and that's the best way to help families and kids. And I'm so grateful for you guys. But that's all about me. I will flash it to Carly now.
Carly?
Awesome. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for the opportunity to let me come in and present with Ali and Emily. As Ali said, I am sitting at our St. Paul office, which means that I cover Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota. And I'm just kind of crashing the main training here today. So again, thanks for having me. So you can see on the screen there, my son and our dog Moose. I'm definitely a lot of things, but first and foremost, I am a mom. Definitely bribed them to take this picture if you are wondering. Candy, super persuasive with a 3-year-old. So that's them. I recently moved to St. Paul for this position with HSI, but before that, lived in Michigan, where I was born and raised. If you're familiar with Traverse City there, where the little cherries are, that's where I came from. Same with Emily, been with HSI for about 1.5 years. We are a huge baseball family, even going as far as having a baseball themed wedding. And baby shower. So little fun fact about us. I am an alumni from Central Michigan University, which is about in the middle of the state of Michigan, and have been employed in the field of child abuse and neglect since 2010, but been a forensic interviewer for almost 9 years. And came from CACs, 2 different CACs that I worked at, one in Fort Myers, Florida, and then one in Traverse City, Michigan. And just like Emily and Allie, super passionate about this work and what we do, and collaborating with CACs. I know we all came from a CAC, so we're super passionate and support the mission and vision of CACs. So I hope you'll feel that and you know, just kind of work with us through this training to know that this is exactly what we love to do and what, you know, our passion is.
So I'm going to be completely transparent right now. I do not see the numbers on these slides, and I have a list here of who's presenting what, and I don't know when I'm on slide number 8. So am I on slide number 8 yet, Carly or Emily? Carly, Emily, what slide are we on?
I had number 9. So I think that was my intro, was 9. So
okay, so Emily, this is you.
Okay.
Correct?
Yep. Can you guys
tell
hear
me
me?
when to move this slide?
Okay.
Yeah.
So again, thank you for allowing us to be here with you. I'm so glad. So just a little bit about HSI interviewers. We're a lot like you. I mean, we're specially trained, of course, to present evidence, which you'll hear more about later. But if you were to look at our interviews, a lot of things are really similar because we use a lot of the same national protocols as you guys do. We provide and do interviews for kids and adults of a lot of different crimes, including cyber crimes, which includes sextortion, human trafficking, labor trafficking, sex trafficking, child sex tourism, genital mutilation cases, civil war cases, and we operate kind of in the similar to a CAC and an MDT approach. When we get cases, we really do talk to our MDT, which includes our agents and includes our computer forensic analysts, includes our AUSAs, to really make sure that we're providing the dual purposes of an investigation, or even the triple purposes, if you will, making sure that everything we do is victim-centered and trauma-centered, while of course trying to gain as much information to corroborate and to corroborate the allegation and to make our investigations richer and stronger so that it's less of a weight on top of our kids. We are the only ones other than, is that me, you guys?
Sorry, guys, that was my bad.
No worries. So other than agents that are classified as 1811s, we are the only ones who are approved to really do interviews in this way. And so it is very nice. We are really incorporated with our teams. Maine has always been very strongly attached with CACs and forensic interviewing. They strongly believe in what we do and why we do it and how good we are at it. But as of now, we have 30 FISs, forensic interview specialists across the country. There's 5 that are Spanish speaking. We do interviews all over the world. Of course, COVID has made that a little bit harder, but travel abroad is happening again as well. And we're all assigned to particular offices. As you can see, for me, it's really all of New England. We can travel. Most of my AOR, or area of responsibility, sorry, we have a ton of acronyms, of which I am still learning, is mainly drivable. So I have been blessed to visit a number of CACs in Maine, mainly because Maine has such a great relationship with my Portland office. Some of those agents may sound really familiar to you. For example, Mike McGonigal or Dave Pawson may sound really familiar to you. I know that they sit on roundtables and they strongly believe and work with their CACs. So for today, you've already gotten to know with an MDT, and I know that there were a lot of questions of how do we get referrals? How does that all work? So I'm hoping that you will be able to gain some knowledge about that. Next screen. So our MDTs, as I mentioned before, will look a lot like yours. In our MDTs, we share decision making. We really talk about what's best for the family, what's best for information that we share, what's best for the investigation. And you know what? It's really nice because we do get to share what really works, what doesn't work. We understand that not one person can fulfill all of the family's needs. Not one person can fulfill all of an investigative person's needs, and not one person is more important than the other person. And you know what? In that MDT, we consider our CACs as part of it because we are very, very aware that when we leave, a family is in your area. There are things that are going to come up for them that, you know, resources, you know, all kinds of different referral processes, who has waiting lists, who doesn't, and what could work best for a family. So I consider our local CACs as part of my MDT when I get a lot of referrals too. And the protocols, the guidelines that we use, they can aid and assist with a lot of different things, including case review, including trying to just figure out how to work best together. So what I would say is, just like a local MDT, or your local CAC, you got to kind of figure out who you want at the table. Our cases present a little bit different. So we may have an AUSA, we may have our agent and the interviewer and our victim support specialist. Of that person in this area is Peter DiMarzio. Some of you may be familiar with him. But sometimes it may include other people too, but it's very important that in your prep work, you kind of decide who needs to be there and why they need to be there. A lot of our information, not unlike any other forensic interview, is really sensitive. So we really want to be careful who's in the room, especially because we tell kids and adults who is there, and we want to protect their confidence, their confidentiality, and their right to just be respected in this process. Not everyone needs to know their experience. So we really try to make sure that everyone that is observing has a purpose for being there, and that everyone has a voice and is getting their say, if you will, or asking the questions that they want to ask. Allie, I'm not sure which slide is next. Okay.
Yeah, and this one's
you see
my
my screen?
slide.
Okay. Go ahead, Carly.
Yep. So as Emily was saying, you know, we're all about the multidisciplinary approach, which we know CACs are as well. So it works really well when we're coming into your space that you're so graciously allowing us to come in and help conduct these interviews. So, you know, you guys already know all this too, that, you know, who should be included in our multidisciplinary team. You know, kind of like the main disciplines that are involved with our victim-based cases, you know, are listed there. Our law enforcement, you know, we don't conduct an interview unless we have law enforcement present, especially if it's, you know, their investigation that they're the lead on it. You know, we want adults who are victims. And then for the family, you know, our non-offending caregivers who are at the CAC, or maybe their guardians, parents, whoever these kids, grown-ups, for lack of a better word, are in their home. We need our victim assistance specialist or our advocate to be meeting with them while the interview is taking place to offer those resources and supports. And then, of course, our forensic interview specialists, whether that includes federal or CAC or both. We all have a perspective, and bringing that to the table for these kids is going to be the better approach. And then, as you guys know, depending on the needs of the case, we also include our attorneys, our prosecutors, DAs, AUSAs when needed. CFAs, our computer forensic analysis. So if we have digital evidence or forensics that we're bringing into the interview, they're really helpful because they're the ones that have gone through all the devices and the evidence that we're seeing. Medical people, CPS, mental health, so many people. Who else can you guys think of? Anyone that we missed? There's a ton of people that come together for these kids. And that brings us to our enabling performance objective number 3, the referrals between CACs and HSI. And then go ahead, Emily, we're going to tag team this one.
Okay. So I know that there's been a lot of questions of when do we contact an HSI FIS? What kind of case would require contact? Here's what I want you all to know. My contact information is on one of these slides. When in doubt, always call me. I'm happy to talk about a case. I'm happy to be a sounding board for any issues that come up. Even if you do not have what we call a federal nexus, even if it looks like it's just state level cases, I guarantee that some of the cases that you are doing have a federal nexus, but it doesn't present that way. It doesn't look that way until you get a kid in for an interview or an adult survivor in for an interview. I want to make sure that everyone feels really comfortable calling me for any questions that you might have. I guarantee that if I have any cases that I have questions on, I'm going to call you guys too. I just really feel like it's important. We all work together. We know all the players and we want what's best for these families. And you know what? We can do what's best for these families together. Carly, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I think just to kind of reiterate what Emily said, I think calling each other is going to be the best thing to get better at what we do, right? We always want to bounce ideas off each other, get that forensic interview perspective. So yeah, please don't hesitate to call, email, text. If you see us at a training, if we can ever be in person again, or if Emily's there visiting, ask the question. We're all about that collaboration and talking. And if Emily's not available because she's on leave or something like that, you'll have other people to reach out to as well. We're here to support you guys, and we want that kind of big teamwork. Let's support each other, and our main goal is to make sure that these kids have the appropriate support that to get through the trauma that they've experienced. So yeah.
And you know what? Our interviewing world is such a small world, you guys. So I want to be a support. I want you guys to be a support to me. So I really, really hope that you do call if you have any questions. So as you guys know, I believe this is my slide too. HSI uses the Prepare and Predict method, and it is such a great tool because a lot of our victims that present with images that have been taken or put online, trafficking victims, labor trafficking victims, these are kids that don't purposefully disclose. These aren't your kids that come into the CAC and you say, hey, tell me why you're here, and they start talking about things. So because we have typically have some evidence, whether it be externally verifiable through like an encounter with a first responder, or if there is physical evidence, we are able to, right from the onset, let a kid know and normalize, hey, we have texts, we have chats, we have images that we're going to want to talk to you about. It helps a kid prepare for the fact that you already know why they're there. It takes away that feeling of, I don't know if I can talk about this. I don't know if I physically can. I don't know if I safely can, because you're already telling them, you know. It gives them an opportunity to predict what it is they're going to see. So it is by far one of the best things that has ever happened to me as an interviewer, I have to say.
I'm so sorry that I messed up this. I want to go back and let you, I don't know what I just did. So we're going to go back. Let's do this. Let's try this. I don't know how to go back to where I was before.
Oh, okay.
Technology always makes things so interesting. We typically
know.
don't use Zoom,
I
you
know,
guys,
like,
so please bear with us.
And
Yeah,
you know
so
what,
see-
you guys, thank God Allie's on the call right now, because there's just no way I would have been able to navigate this. She knows it too. That's why she's
All right, let's try this one more time. You guys know, like HSI doesn't, we don't use Zoom as like an app that we're allowed to use. We're allowed to do it if someone else has it, but we don't use it every day. So like, that's why I'm acting like I've never presented or seen anything in my life. So just so you know, but go ahead.
So really, this is an introductory slide to prepare and predict. I mean, it is an informed practice. It is nationally recognized as best practice to talk to kids and adult survivors, especially when you have evidence. There is a paper through ABSAC that was published, I think it was in 2002. There was also a position paper that was done by the National Children's Advocacy Center. And I think we have a slide that has links to that. It is really a thoughtful way to present what can be really hard things for a kid to see. I say that because what we do is we really normalize what it is that we're talking about. We tell kids and adult survivors, listen, we have a picture, we have a text, we have a WhatsApp chat or another type of social media that we want to talk to you about. And we give them the option. We would never present something to them without making sure that they're absolutely okay with it. So we give them the option of seeing something, of hearing about something. We describe it so that they can have an opportunity to kind of almost prepare themselves on whether or not they want to tell us, right? And we do it in such a trauma-informed way. It's a way to honor the kids and their experience. You know, I by far, again, is one of the best tools that I have in my belt at this point, along with all the other things we learn as interviewers to, you know, maintain rapport and get kids, you know, assess barriers and alternative hypotheses. This process makes the evidence or the information that we get stronger, richer. It actually points to other evidence that we weren't even aware of. It just makes disclosures easier while doing it in a very, very trauma-informed way. Do you guys want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that another reason we have this slide in here is because oftentimes we are asked, like, what's the research behind it? Are you published, or where did you get that information? And so we were actually put in the book, Evidence-Based Investigative Interviewing, that Nick Dickinson and Little wrote, and we're in their chapter on techniques for interviewing reluctant child witnesses, because they have recognized, allowed children, adults, victims, the ability to be able to disclose, even if they were reluctant and or worried and or hesitant to disclose. And so we just wanted to put that out there so everybody understood that it is a part of the process, and that it's not just something that we're making up, but it's being recognized nationally and internationally.
So as I mentioned before, the FIP program, or the Forensic Interview Program, has a really coordinated, committed relationship with CACs across the country. I know in New England that I have been blessed to have very strong relationships with my CAC, partially because I know a lot of you, but more importantly, because we share this great passion for what we do and we want to make things better. So to do that, I have noticed in several of the CACs that I've been, that there is a very coordinated response to cases, no matter what the allegation is. And that is partially because of the very strong relationship that the CACs have in Maine with our local HSI's office. It is the epitome of putting a victim's needs first prior to the investigation. Guys, can you still see me?
Mm-hmm.
It says my connection is timed out.
Oh, no, we can see you. Can you see
Okay.
the slides or?
Hold on.
So we're on the slide that says,
You
what does
guys-
collaboration look like?
And that's my slide anyway, so I can jump in, Emily.
Thanks.
So yeah, Emily talked about collaborating with CACs and how to do that. But so what exactly does that look like? So some examples, the collaboration could be that CACs and local law enforcement are referring federal cases to HSI, or it could be that HSI and our special agents are referring potential cases to CAC and local law enforcement for state charges. So it can go either way for that collaborating. So for example, if a CAC or local law enforcement is going to refer a case to us, example might be that maybe you guys are doing a forensic interview, a child discloses maybe that some CSAM or child sexually abusive material occurred during their narrative when they're talking about their abuse, or maybe there's some human trafficking that they're talking about, something along those lines, and we don't necessarily have that evidence yet to go ahead and maybe move forward with that portion of the interview. So it would be appropriate for you guys to go ahead and continue that interview, maybe more on the hands-on stuff, and get as much information as you can about maybe where that CSAM would be, or maybe where the trafficking took place. So then law enforcement can go ahead and continue their investigation, gather their evidence, and then maybe you refer to us and we come in for another interview based on the federal charges that came up in your previous one. And then we always get the question about when to call you versus FBI. So I'm going to kind of bunt that one over to Allie so she can explain that really well.
All right. So thanks, Carly. Put me on the spot. No, just kidding. So yeah, so here's the deal. The FBI and HSI, we both do federal cases. All the charges and all the statutes that you guys have at the state level, we have at the federal level, and we can both investigate the exact same crimes. So it's not that you should send things to HSI versus FBI. What we're saying is, you can send it to anyone that you want. You don't have to send it to one or the other. So people then will say to us, well, FBI has an MOU with NCA. We don't have an MOU with NCA because we've never felt like we needed one. We haven't ever had an issue with bringing cases to a CAC. We've never had an issue of working with people in Maine. We've never had a problem with coming into CACs or asking for space or working with all of you in Maine. So for us, it's a non-issue. So the MOU really has nothing to do with the referral process. It just happens to be that the FBI needed that MOU, and we're working without it. What we do is the same. We investigate the same types of crimes. We do interviews for the same types of crimes. There's really no difference in that, other than the fact that, at HSI, we want to work with you wholeheartedly. We want to work with you and give you referrals, and we'd like for you to give us referrals, and that's the way it works. So it's not like a battle of who's better, who's worse, how does this happen. When we're doing cases, investigations can fall in anybody's lap. So if there's an investigation that has to do with CSAM or images. It could actually fall in the FBI's lap or it can fall in HSI's lap. It just depends on who's doing the investigation. There's no real rhyme or reason for it, other than that's who took the lead and that's who took the time in that sense to do that. So I don't want you guys ever to worry about, well, I don't know who to call. I don't know if I should call you or the FBI. Call who you think is best and call who you have a working relationship with. We work really well with FBI. And we don't, it's not about who's going to take whose case. Like that's not the way we look at it. We want to do what's best for victims. We want to do what's best for the families. We want to work with you guys the best that we can. And that's how the referrals come to be. We will refer to you cases that we feel are CAC cases. When there's a case and we feel it's a state level case of child sexual abuse, or something that you guys specialize in as at the CAC, we're going to say, you know what, this isn't not necessarily an HSI case. There doesn't appear to be a federal nexus. I'm going to call the CAC and say, is this the case that they would take? And that's kind of how we look at it. We don't look at it as which CAC should we call. We're gonna call the person who is the best to support it in the jurisdiction, all that kind of stuff. So when you're thinking about HSI and FBI, just think of it as we are your federal partners. We want to work with you really, really well, and we want to do what's best for victims, and that's where HSI stands. And so we would love for you to pass your referrals on to us. Give us a call. We also know that if HSI is lead on a case, it's going to go to us. If FBI is lead on a case, it's going to go to them. It's just the way it works, like anything. But you guys don't have to worry about that. Just give us a call, refer cases to us, and we'll take that messiness out of it. We don't want you guys to worry about what that looks like on your end. All you have to do is give us a call and we can consult with you on it and figure that out. And if it's a case that we can take on, we will, and we'll work with you to do it. So that's the most important part of that.
Ali, we have a quick question in the chat.
Yeah, go for it.
It says, does the FBI use similar best practice techniques?
Yeah, I would assume so. I have worked with the FBI for many, many years, and they have a different protocol, right? So they have their own protocol that they use. They don't use Prepare and Predict. But the interest in, we're all forensic interviewers. We all want what's best for the victims. We're all investigating crimes in a victim-centered and trauma-informed way. And so, yeah, I mean, regardless of whether you refer it to us or the FBI, we're all going to do what's best for victims. We're all going to use best practice. We all originally came, and even the newer interviewers, FBI is growing as well. Everybody came from a CAC, and that's one of our criteria at HSI. So at HSI, everyone, as you see, you've met Carly and Emily today and myself, we all came from the CAC world. So we all come from the practice of a CAC and working with MDTs and working in a victim-centered manner. And we brought that to the federal level. None of this happened before CACs. All of this happened after CACs, okay? And it just to fit the needs of the crimes that we are investigating. So FBI, HSI, at the federal level, there's even forensic interviewers at the State Department. And we work really, really closely with her. There's actually only one interviewer with the State Department, but we have a wonderful working relationship. Why? Because what's most important is the victims, and the victims have to come first. And so that that. So you should feel confident with that. As to the protocol, I can't speak to that. As to what they do every single day, I can't speak to that. But what I do know is that it is a victim-centered and trauma-informed approach, just like we are. And so you can be rest assured that whoever gets the case will be able to really incorporate that. And you feel confident that we're going to help you through it, and we're going to do really well and do really good stuff with that. Hopefully I answered the question.
Yeah, and to kind of continue to talk about collaborating with CACs in particular, you guys are helping us out when you're allowing us to come in and do these interviews, but then like we already kind of talked about, you're the local experts on, you know, the supports and resources in the area for the families. And when we leave your area, the families are still there. So they're still going to need those supports and resources even when we're not there. I mean, we look to you guys to definitely do that and make sure that they're getting the correct advocacy, therapy, medical services, all those good things. We're also able to provide trainings and you know, peer review opportunities with each other. I don't know about anybody else, but peer review is one of my favorite things about being a forensic interviewer when it comes to, you know, networking and talking to other interviewers. I feel like we all kind of have a similar personality of sorts. So it's always nice to, you know, bounce ideas off each other, do all that networking. So just know that that's part of the collaboration too, that you know, we can learn from each other. And I think that's great, not only for us and for our skill set, but also for the families that we're serving.
Carly, can I just add something really quickly too regarding peer review opportunity? So guys, in New England, we have enjoyed this great relationship where we as interviewers would meet. It was one of my favorite things to do. If there is ever an opportunity where you want to bounce things off or you want to talk about something that came up in a case, please reach out. Again, we are a very small community of interviewers, and you know, it's something that I luckily get because I work with such great coworkers at HSI, but I miss my New England people too. So, and I'm local, so it's just a drive for me.
Mm-hmm. And it's not, and I just really want to emphasize, this is not about like how cool it is. Let me take this case because it's so cool. Like, we're all about what's best for that victim. And so that's why you want to collaborate, and that's why we want to work with CACs. If the CAC interviewer is the person who should be doing this interview, then by all means they should be doing it. If the federal forensic interviewer is the one that should be doing it, by all means they should be doing it. But the most important thing is that we work together. So if a CAC interviewer is doing a case that they don't see every single day in their offices, and they're like, you know what, I want to reach out to Emily because I want to talk about the case that I just did. Even if Emily's not involved, know that Emily can consult with you and work with you. And so it's not about, if I call HSA, they're going to take this case from me. Absolutely not. You know, and we want to make sure that this is why we're here. We are a group, we are a team. And so we will provide trainings for you. We will provide peer review opportunities. And those things are really important for the growth of forensic interviewers, regardless of who you work for. Oops. All right, so let's move on to the types of cases that HSI sees. We see tons of different types of cases. So some of the majority of the things that we see on a regular basis is, you know, cases that involve child pornography or CSAM. So sextortion, bait would be like a catfishing scheme. Based cases are what we see a lot of, and human trafficking. So we do a lot of victims of human trafficking. Some of the stuff that is happening a little bit more frequently in Maine is a state, and then you guys can probably say yes, it is, where we've been seeing a lot more of the FGM, the female genital mutilation or cutting. That is something that we, you know, have really stepped up and taken a big stance on, and it's a very different type of investigation than a child abuse investigation. While it might be child abuse, the coordinated response is very different. The way we approach families is very different. The way we interview victims is very different than what we see every single day with a typical child sexual abuse case. So this is something that we specialize in. We specialize in cases that are macro cases where there's tons of victims all over the country, with maybe one person who's doing the crime because it's on the internet. Or we do cases where there's a teacher or a person of trust or power in the community, whether it be a Boy Scout leader, a coach, a teacher, something to that effect. That's what we specialize in. We specialize in these things. And so we want to work with the CACs to make it the best environment for that victim that we can possibly do. So again, it always comes back to the victims of the cases. It doesn't come back to HSI wants to take this case. It's about what does HSI specialize in? What are CACs specializing in? Do CACs sometimes see macro cases? Absolutely. Do CACs see human trafficking cases? Absolutely. Do CACs see sextortion cases? Absolutely. But your specialty may lie somewhere else. And with HSI, our specialty lies on these cases. We're no longer seeing the everyday sex abuse by the father cases, which you guys are seeing every single day. So I think that's really important, and knowing that we want to work with you wholeheartedly to do that. Now, I'm sorry, but I don't know if this is my slide as well, or am I passing this off?
Allie, we actually have a couple quick questions if you don't mind.
Yeah, please give me all the questions are.
Yeah, we have a couple questions on when referring. So are there different criteria we should consider when deciding who to contact, the FBI versus HSI? And then another person said, wouldn't it be our law enforcement partners reaching out to Homeland Security or FBI versus our CAC staff?
Wonderful questions. I think there is no criteria for who to call. So what we're saying to you is we would love to work with you, and we would love to be that speed dial on your phone. We would love to be able to come to work with you and work on and collaborate on a case or consult on a case with you. So if you are, as an interviewer, receiving a case, and this happens all the time, so I'll get calls from forensic interviewers from across the country. Be like, hey, Allie, I wanted to reach out because we're getting this case that's coming in tomorrow, and it is a production of child pornography case, and the HSI agents are bringing it in. And I wanted to call you. Oh, okay, great, thank you. So sometimes our agents will, because they're so used to not having enough of us, that they have gotten to a wonderful habit, which is great, is to using the CACs. And we want that. We want trained forensic interviewers to do our victim cases. Now that we have so many interviewers and we can cover our areas a lot easier, there's still going to be times when we can't, but we can do it a lot easier. We want our agents to contact us, but if they've reached out and scheduled a CAC interview, we just want to know about it. So if you're doing a case, we can help you. We can talk to you about that. If you haven't figured it out, if no one's really said to you who the federal partner is that's working on this case in addition to the state and locals, then just call us and ask. And if it's something that we can help you with, awesome. If it's something that we would refer you to the FBI, we'll tell you that. So you don't ever have to worry who should I call? All you have to do is pick up the phone and call us, and we'll be able to help you with that. So if we know already that the FBI is actually working in this case investigation already, we're going to be like, you know what? I'm going to refer you to this forensic interviewer because that person they're already working this case, and we're going to refer it to that so that you go there. But if it's not a case that federal interviewers are already involved in, then you could involve whoever you want, whoever you have that better working relationship, whoever you feel more comfortable with, whoever you'd like to do. So there's not you have to call us, you have to call them. Just call us and we'll work it out with you. So I don't want you to worry about that. As for, yes, should the law enforcement partners be reaching out? Absolutely. So if there's a case and there's an investigation where there is a federal nexus, they should be reaching out to their federal partners automatically. But if they've not done that, and you as the interviewer say, you know what, I really feel like I should be including HSI. I really think that Emily should be, I just call Emily and talk to her about it. That's when you guys can do that at the CAC level. But yes, I think that your law enforcement knows that they should be reaching out. They know what their limitations are in terms of the crimes that they can prosecute or send to the prosecution. And just like our HSI agents know, we don't have a federal code for child sexual abuse. So we have to refer it to the state and locals for that. And so there are certain things that they know that they have to be doing, and there are certain things that we can do as forensic interviewers, as working together in consulting. So take away which agency you're going to contact. Always feel free to contact us, and we'll help you through that on a case-by-case basis. So don't ever worry, like, I don't know if I should call you. I don't know if I should call FBI. Just call us and we'll tell you when you reach out to us if there's something that we need to know, okay? When you have a cyber crimes and technology facilitated crime, this is our specialty. This is what we do every single day. So every single day in your CACs, you are seeing child sexual abuse. Those are coming through your doors daily. And that is your guys' expertise. And I know that because I worked in a CAC, and I know that that was my expertise when I was working at CAC. At the federal level with HSI, cyber crimes is one of the probably 90% of what we do. Weekly, we are doing these cases. Sometimes daily, we are doing these cases. This is what we're doing every single day, day in and day out. So we are available for all different kinds of things. We can talk with adults, we can talk with minors, we can talk with people, we can go to people's homes, which is something that forensic interviewers at HSI, we go to search warrants. We go and talk to parents at their home, and we travel worldwide. We travel around the country doing these interviews, and because this is kind of our bread and butter. We have trafficking cases. Again, it's not to say that these cases don't come through the CACs. Absolutely they do, and please recognize that I recognize that. But this is what we do all the time. So we actually interview victims of all ages, not just children. So if there's an adult trafficking victim, an adult labor trafficking victim, an adult sex trafficking victim, we are working side by side with our agents to do these cases. We go to operations, we go to recoveries, we go on scene. We are working with the first responders to respond. If we don't respond at the site, we still can be used later on. So what sometimes happens is law enforcement will go out, they'll do their operation, they'll do their, whatever they're doing to work with the case, and then they'll call us after and be like, I have a victim and I need her interviewed. And we can do it that way too. So there's no limit to how we get involved into these cases, but we'd work directly with our agents working with that. So that's also very, very important. Everything we do is completely informed. So whether it be a technology facilitated case or treatment trafficking or FGM, we're completely informed interviews. There's nothing that our law enforcement cannot share with us in order for us to do our jobs better. And again, we travel all over the country and all over the world doing these types of cases. I talked about FGM, and I really want to stress this because I believe that FGM is an issue that's happening in Maine a lot. Just from the information that I've received, okay, and the population of the communities that are in your areas. So FGM is very, very specific. These types of cases take a lot of coordinated response prior to the interview. Oftentimes, because the parents are the ones complicit in the crime, getting consent for the interview or getting the ability to interview that child is going to be more difficult. So similar to the fact that if you have a mother or a father who's abusing their child in the home, you wouldn't go to that father and ask for consent if he's the one sexually abusing the child, right? Because he's complicit in the crime. So the law enforcement has to be very careful of that. With FGM, it's also very similar. However, there's a bigger, even more secrecy component than the child sexual abuse stuff. So if we think there's secrecy involved with child sexual abuse, there's even more secrecy involved with female genital mutilation. So this is something that one of the most horrific things could ever happen to someone. And they're still they're made to be, and they're convinced that it's normal and that it's okay. And what they experienced is not out of the ordinary. And it's just a whole other mental component to this. So we really want to avoid the additional coaching and other complications that come along with it. So it's a really coordinated response and using trauma-informed practices. This is what we do on a regular basis. So if we come into your CSC and you're like, why is HSI here? It's because we're coming for a reason. We're coming because this is a type of case that takes a lot of extra care, and you might be the best person to interview that person. Doesn't mean we won't be involved. And so we want to work together. We're never trying to take cases from a CSC or we're saying this is ours, not yours. We want to work together in making sure that victims get what they need. Just with our travelers, you know, when someone crosses state lines, when someone travels to another country, this is what transnational child sex offender cases are all about. So it's very, very common that are overseas, and sometimes those victims are here in the United States. And this is a very, very, again, very, very specialized type of interview. So we want to make sure that those kids are getting what they need. We video and audio record just like you guys do. We have Spanish speakers. We can travel to do cases. If we're very, very well trained in using interpreters as well, because we do travel to other countries. So we were the first interviewers to ever conduct forensic interviews in both Russia and Cuba. That's kind of cool. We traveled to Russia, and then obviously we didn't have a Russian speaker, so we had to use interpreters. I traveled to Cuba and I did everything in Spanish, but the regime was such that they never allowed the US to come in before. And because HSI came in and we talked to them about what we do, we were able to come in and do these interviews. So, Carly, do you want to take this one?
We actually have a couple more follow-up questions, if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
So the first question is, why are there two entities working on these types of cases, referring to the FBI and HSI? And do you collaborate with the FBI to ensure there is no missing evidence from a previous report or any missing pieces?
Yeah, so I missed the first part of the question when you were talking. Can you repeat the beginning part of the question?
Sure. The beginning part is, why are there two entities working on the same types of cases, referring to the FBI and HSI?
The same reason there's CACs across Maine, and there's multiple CACs across Maine. So we want to be able to provide the best services, just like you guys want to provide the best services for all victims in the state of Maine. Their law enforcement in general investigate at the state level and investigates child abuse, child physical abuse, neglect, emotional abuse, sexual abuse, and there's investigators and investigations that happen across the country all the time. Same with the federal laws. There just happens to be two different agencies. It doesn't mean, just like there's sheriff departments and there's police departments, and there's ICACs and there's local law enforcement. It's the same kind of process. I mean, I don't know that, again, I think people get bogged down with whose case it is instead of thinking about who's working on this case to better victims. So yes, we work really hard at not duplicating efforts, just like we would want you guys not to duplicate efforts. So if you have a case that involves a potential federal nexus, that's why we want you to reach out to us, so that you guys can cross-check to make sure that you guys aren't interviewing someone who's already been interviewed. And we'll do the same thing. So if we're working a case, we want to make sure that if this child's already been interviewed, we know about that interview process. And we want to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts that you guys have already done. Or if you guys have a relationship with this victim already or family, we want to know that too. So we're constantly cross-checking. We're constantly making sure that we're not traumatizing victims by talking to them more times than necessary. It's just the way the process works. Just it's very similar to what you guys are doing. Like if there's a victim in Portland and then she moves to Virginia, someone in Virginia is more likely going to be like, hey, has this person had an interview and what happened? You know, that's going to happen throughout CACs. It happens all the time. Or victim was visiting their grandmother in Virginia and they live in Portland, and now they're going to have an interview and the crime took place in another state. You're going to do that courtesy interview for Virginia because they're there. Same with HSI and FBI. So again, I want you guys to worry less about who to refer it to. Just call us and we'll make sure that what you need is getting taken care of and what the victim's needs are being taken care of, because we're going to always
Yeah.
cross-check that.
Allie, can I add something really quickly?
Mhm.
So specifically in Maine, the FBI and HSI work very closely together. So there are cases where they may be investigating jointly, but one agency may have the lead on the investigation. It doesn't mean that they're not going to work together. It just means that that agency is handling the majority of the crimes and getting them charged. But I don't want to piggyback on what you're saying, Ali, but they work very, very closely together and communicate all the time, sharing information. I know this because it's my area, and I've actually had cases where the FBI will hand over a case to HSI to say, hey, this is something that I think is better suited for you guys, or I know you're already working on this victim. There is a very great and strong collaboration with the FBI and HSI in Maine, particularly.
Yeah, no, I think that's wonderful for you to point out. And we have what's called a deconfliction process. So we are not investigating the same crime as somebody else. And we're not doing multiple services that have already been dealt with. And so the deconfliction process is really big. We work with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. We work with other task forces. We work with ICAC, and so we make sure that's being done and taken care of.
And we have one other question before we move on. Is there ever a time when you would refer a case to a local CAC directly, or do you contact local law enforcement, the DA, DHHS, and they refer to the CAC?
Yeah, we refer cases all the time. So the way it works is when HSI is investigating a case, we have some people call it the first right of refusal. Some people call it something different. But when there is a federal investigation taking place, our agents are being instructed to contact us first. We look at the case, we review the case with the agent. So our role in the investigation is slightly different than your role at the CAC. We are a little bit more active part of the investigative process. And we look at the situation, we look at the case, and we can say to them, you know, this needs to go to a CAC. I'm going to reach out. And so the interviewers, the forensic interviewing team, would reach out to the CAC and say, hey, here's the deal. We have this case, and, you know, yeah, we're looking at possession of child pornography, but we have no reason to believe there was any production charges, but we do have reason to believe that this father or this uncle or this neighbor was sexually abusing this child. This is a CAC specialty. This should go to the CAC, and we're going to refer it to you guys to get involved. They're also going to involve local law enforcement. Why? Because that's the crime that have the charges and the crimes and the statutes to investigate child sexual abuse, child physical abuse, and all those other wonderful things, which we don't at the federal level. So we are oftentimes reaching out and saying, we need your assistance. That's why we ask of you to do the same for us. If you are getting a referral for a federal investigation at the federal level, we would ask that you have the same courtesy as to reach out to us and say, hey, this appears to be a federal case. It doesn't appear that you're involved. I want to consult with you and figure this out. And maybe it's just because that particular agent didn't know any better. Maybe it's because that agent really enjoys working with you, and maybe because you are the best person to do it. And that's okay. Our egos are put aside, and we're not going to ever say it has to be us and it has to be you. But we are going to do what's best for the victim. So we absolutely will refer cases directly to you as a result of that, because we know that these are things that you guys need to be doing, and this is what you guys do as forensic interviewers at the CAC. What other questions do we have in that?
We just had one come in, and it says, is it possible to have an MOU with HSI?
Absolutely. So if you're state or your CAC would like to have an MOU with us, we can definitely work on that. That's an easy thing to do, and we welcome it. And that would really solidify our working relationship with you guys. The reason we don't have them yet, and is because, like I said earlier, we haven't felt the need. Like, you guys have been so gracious to me over the past 12 years of opening your doors to me whenever I had a case, and you're doing the same thing with Emily now. And so we haven't had that need to do it, but it's a wonderful thing that we're totally open to. So if you guys at your CCs would like to do an MOU, absolutely, we can make that happen. We'll write something up, we'll work with you guys on it, and absolutely make it so that we can have even to strengthen our working relationship with you guys 100%.
Those are all our questions for now.
Excellent. Okay, so what's next? What's next is we're going to look at the prepare and predict process. Okay, so I am going to, and this is all of our contact information. So I'm going to leave this up for just a minute so you guys can look at it. And you guys, me as the forensic interviewer who covers our area called HSI Boston. HSI Boston covers everything from Connecticut all the way up to Maine. And so she is your primary point of contact. If Emily's not available, she's going to have someone on our out of office so you can contact, but you could always reach out to Carly and you can always reach out to me. We'll be happy to help you with anything. We will probably refer to Emily first, but if Emily is busy or Emily isn't available, or she's on vacation or she's on sick leave, but please reach out to us no matter what. Even if you think it's a silly question, there's no silly questions with us. We want to work with you guys.
And I've just noticed that on the slide, my number actually populated to Carly's number. So I will put my personal number in the chat.
Weird.
I know, right?
I know.
Good catch. You're gonna
I just
keep calling
noticed.
me, being
Thank
like,
you for noticing. Yeah.
And if you called Carly, she would be fantastic and fabulous. But you would be very confused.
So funny.
yeah, and please guys keep the questions coming.
Yeah.
We
All right,
we love
Emily
this to be
just posted in the
interactive and
chat.
conversational.
Absolutely. So let me now close this out and bring up. There we go. Now I have to put the slideshow on, huh? Okay. So again, I'm not a Zoom expert, but I believe that Emily is starting us off with this. So Emily, you tell me when to switch the slides over.
Okay. Can we go to the next slide? Okay. So I want to start it off just to kind of put you in the mindset of how these kids usually and adults usually present to us, right? They've never disclosed. That's how we usually get our cases. These kids are coming to us and sometimes don't have an idea of why they're coming to see us. So has there ever been a time where you've had a secret, right? And no one really knows about it. You've never even really said anything.
Do you want me to bring up the whole thing, or do you want to do it one by one?
You just bring up the whole thing. Thank you. And you know, that secret is something that would be very surprising to the people around you. That could probably be shocking, but you just wish that that one person knew, that you could share that you could finally talk about it and be heard. Felt like when you did it. I'm sure that each and every one of you as interviewers in your time has had a kid or an adult tell you what they feel. I feel lighter. I feel like I didn't think I could tell anyone. I didn't think anybody would understand. I didn't think I would be believed. You know, I felt like this was my fault because someone asked me to do something and I did it. You know, so a lot of what we do is ensuring that people have a safe place to talk to about these things, a place without judgment. It's what you do in your interviews every single day, right? You provide this space where a person can tell you anything that they want, even if it's not related to the crime, in their own way, in their own space, in their own comfort level. And so what Prepare and Predict does is it makes it easier to tell about that shocking secret, right? Because we go in there with some previous knowledge and we're already letting kids know, and adults, that we get it, we understand, we know something has been going on. Of course, we can't know everything, right? Because just because we've seen or read something, it doesn't mean that we understand what their experience was in its totality. And, you know, we have to go in thinking that even though we have something that we've seen, that there could be an alternative hypothesis to what's happening. But it takes almost, and forgive this phrase, but it almost takes the fishing expedition out of it, right? I mean, how many times have you gotten a case in where you're like, no, something's happening to this kid, and you're like, well, tell me why you think you're here, and is there anybody worried about you? Tell me what worries are that people may have. I'm sure that you guys have had that happen, and you know that there's something going on because you've looked at a CPS report, or you've looked at some collateral information that's saying, hey, this is exactly what's going on, but you can't necessarily say it in that way. So you have to create all of these different ways of trying to transition to the topic, whereas Prepare and Predict gives us a natural transition. It gives us a way to almost take those barriers away from a kid even before they started. So with Prepare and Predict, what's really nice about it is we take that denial away before it even starts, right? So, okay, Allie, next screen. Okay, so at the end of this presentation, we're going to give examples that are victim-centered, presenting evidence techniques. Students will be able to identify the appropriate situations in which evidence presentation should be used, how to select and prepare that evidence for the interview process, and when to use evidence presenting effectively in the forensic interview using the HSI Prepare and Predict model. So it's always about remembering what our end goal is. So our first performance objectives is to identify and examine the science of presenting evidence in an interview. Our second is to provide pre-interview preparation strategies. And our third is to actually talk about the Prepare and Predict method and learn about it. Next screen. Okay. So what our agenda today is, we're going to talk about the past, talk about some knowledge that we should have prior to having any of these kids or adults come in, talk about how the evidence can be utilized in the forensic interview, examine the HSI Prepare and Predict method, explore the science of presenting evidence, share strategies and techniques, which is by far my favorite, and discuss suggestions and feedback. Okay, next slide. I can't tell if the next slide is mine, you guys. I think it is, yes. So these cases, when we're presenting evidence, will require a lot of preparation, okay? Because we have so much information prior to even having a person sitting in our interview space in front of us, it's going to require looking at a lot of things. So we have to figure out what it is we have. What is the evidence that we have? Is it something that supports what we think is happening? Is it proof that something happened? Is it information that is not supposed to, that is privileged or confidential? Could there be more than one alternative hypothesis? It is not atypical to have thousands of pages of evidence that we as interviewers at HSI have to look through. What that means is that I'm in an office days, if not weeks before an interview, looking through things, sitting with my agents, preparing exactly what it is that I want, exactly the frame that I want, if it's a video or if there's a particular part of a chat that I'm looking at that I really want to talk to a kid about, and really discussing the purpose of presenting that evidence, right? Because as a team, our other team members may say, I want to present this, I want you to present this during your interview, and it may not have a purpose. So we really, really take great care in what we show, in how we talk about it, and in what we choose. Next slide.
All right, so there's lots of different kinds of evidence that we can use and bring into our interviews. So remember, it doesn't always have to be tangible evidence. We don't physically have to bring in that full folder of images and stuff like that. So these are just some examples of what can be utilized in an interview. You know, and you might be presenting evidence and you don't even know it yet. So like if you have a kid, for example, that comes in and he has a black eye, you're not going to just, you know, dance around that subject and ask about, you know, stuff like that. You're going to, you know, straight up be like, hey, I see you have a black eye. Tell me what happened. So even doing something like that, you're already presenting evidence. You might have already done it too if you have a kid that you know just came from the hospital or had a medical exam a few days prior, and you know that they tested positive for STIs or you know, had that meeting with the doctor or a nurse maybe and disclosed to them. So you have that evidence that you can bring in. I mean, you can see the list there: text messages, emails. Let's make it a little interactive. Can you guys think of anything else to write in the chat? Anything that's not listed that maybe you've used in the past? I know, you know, we've brought journals and diaries in that were found on scene, receipts from hotels, you know, other places. Maybe I actually just had a case where, or I think it was somebody else's case that I was watching an interview on, and they had a receipt from like a flower shop because the perpetrator sent our victim flowers. So she was able to use that and bring it in because the child completely omitted it from the narrative. So she was able to bring that in. Anything else you guys can think of?
Hey, you know what, Carly, you know what I was thinking about that is when something that was newer to me is bringing in confessions from a target.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good one that wasn't listed. Yep, we're definitely able to bring that stuff in. And that was new to me as well. ITAC days. So yeah, that's definitely a transition. It's not something obviously that maybe we have, again, that tangible proof, but we do have the report or, you know, the word from the law enforcement officer who maybe conducted that interview that like, this is what our target or our perpetrator said. Yeah, that's a really good one. Here are some lists too that evidence might, you know, like I said, not always be tangible, but we have that, you know, we have those things. Like I said, you know, you might have a kid that comes in with a bruise or, you know, have you ever had the situation where you had, you know, a pregnant victim and it's really, really obvious that she's pregnant? You know, we're not going to dance around the subject. We're going to bring that in as evidence and say, I see that you're pregnant, and you know, tell me all about that. You know, witness
So if
statements,
I could
like,
just give an example, I just got
please.
yesterday or the day before, I can't remember, these days are like blurring into each other lately, but I got a call because there was an investigation that we're working on, and these particular victims had already been interviewed prior. And the reason we were involved was because there's additional information that came to light. And so, and it's at the federal level, and that on that. So the interviewer was able to review the interview that was done prior, so that we didn't duplicate and re-interview someone, but we were extending it as a secondary interview, as something that happened after. So what she noticed, she's like, I watched this interview. The interviewer didn't talk about anything that she knew. And so the victim got into this habit of, denying and being reluctant and not talking about anything. And then 45 minutes in, she's like, the girl was like, I'm not going to talk to you now about that. You knew that I ran away and you haven't brought that up in 45 minutes. So this is kind of what we're looking at here. We want you guys to know and acknowledge that you don't have to tell them that you know what happened when they ran away, because that's what they're there to tell you about, but you can acknowledge that you know something. And so by doing that, you're actually improving the trust, and you are building that rapport even stronger, because you're letting them know, hey, there's some things that I know. Like, I know you're pregnant, or I know that you went to the doctor and you were diagnosed with gonorrhea, or I know that there's these tattoos, or whatever it is, right at the front. And this is externally verifiable information. I'm not gonna, if I have a confession, I'm not gonna, from the suspect who's talked about what he did to a victim, I'm not gonna regurgitate maybe what he said, but I am going to say, well, I know that, in the process, the police that I'm working with, they talked to your dad, and that your dad told them everything that he did to you. I might say something like that, so I can get that out in the front, so they don't have to worry about, should I or should I not talk to her about that. So it's part of what Prepare and Predict is about, and exploring that. So sorry, but I wanted to use that example because it just came up the other day. And by the time that after 45 minutes of not actually addressing the issue, and then coming through and being like, well, I know you ran away, the girl no longer wanted to talk about that. And she wasn't going to go there with the interviewer, and the interviewer didn't get what the interviewer could have received and could have gotten in from that victim to help that victim, had she only acknowledged it earlier. So sorry, Carly.
Yeah, no, that's a really good example. I actually just had a case yesterday where the girl that I interviewed had previously talked to a CPS worker on scene and disclosed to the CPS worker that dad had done something to her butt. They didn't go into specifics. CPS ended the interview right away, and then I interviewed or in my narrative event practice. That's how I introduced the topic of concern. I said, hey, I understand that a CPS worker, a male CPS worker is actually what I said, was at your house and you told them that something happened to your butt. Like, tell me all about that. And then I explained, just like we did with when you told me about watching the movie with your mom and we went through detail from beginning to end, I want you to do exactly the same thing and tell me about that. And it works really well. It just kind of takes out that extra piece of, kind of like dancing around the subject. So all of these things that we're talking about evidence, you can definitely bring up, and it's not leading because it's externally verifiable, and it's something that we can prove to be true. So we always have to keep that in mind when we're going to present any type of evidence.
So there's a wonderful question, Carly, and it comes from Jen Duffy, and she says, what if the victim is not ready to talk or share the secrets? Aren't we forcing them into a position they may not want to be in? And so my answer to that, Jen, is no. Acknowledging something doesn't force someone to talk about it. It allows them the ability to do so should they wish to talk about it. But just because if I say to the child, so I know that you went to the doctor yesterday, doesn't mean they have to tell me about the doctor's visit. I'm acknowledging that they went to the doctor, and let's talk about it. If they don't want to, I'm not going to force them to talk about it. If I acknowledge that I know that that they ran away, doesn't mean that they have to talk to me about the runaway. Doesn't have to mean they have to tell me anything about what happened. Yep. But I can acknowledge it and let them know it's okay to talk about, because I know something. I don't know it all, but I know something. So I think that's really important to recognize. We are using, in CACs, we are using externally verifiable information all the time. If you have a victim of child sexual abuse, and that victim has gone to their teacher and said, Daddy touched my pee-pee, and then that teacher goes to the social worker, who goes to the principal, who reports child abuse and calls in Maine, I can't remember. You're not going to say to that child, I know that you told your teacher that your daddy touches your pee. But you might say, at some point, you might say, well, I know that you talked to your teacher about something that happened. Tell me all about that. Same thing. So you're not forcing her to tell you. You're allowing her the ability to talk to you about it because it's okay to talk about those things in here. So I think that's what's really important. Disclosure is a process, and we'll never take that away from that victim. We can never force a victim to tell before they're ready.
Yeah, and I actually.
To add to that, Allie,
go
ahead, Emily.
No, you go ahead, Carly. I'll wait my turn.
I was just going to say the same girl that I interviewed yesterday, she actually said that to me. She looked at me and she goes, do I have to talk about that? And I could tell she was getting emotional, and I didn't tell her, yes, you have to talk about it. The way that I went about it with her is I said, my job is to, try to understand better everything that happened. You're here to help me understand. And I want to get your perspective, so talking to her in that way too. I didn't say yes and I didn't say no. I kind of gave her the option, like, listen, my job is just to understand. And it's really important that I do understand so I can make sure that you stay safe. And she looked at me and she goes, okay. And she kind of like took a few deep breaths, and I told her, I said, take your time. Like, I'm here, I'm here until you're ready to talk. And she did. She took a couple seconds, and she was 11 years old and eventually poured her heart out. So I think it's just all about, our tools that we're using and that flow of the interview and making sure that it is child-led.
Yeah. And I just wanted to add, because that question was, what happens if a kid doesn't want to talk about it? They don't want to be there. We have this evidence and we're talking about them. I've had that happen. I actually had that happen last week with a victim who's very trauma bonded to her target. And what I did was I acknowledged that she didn't want to talk about it. I honored her wish not to, but because the truth of the matter is that at some point she's going to recognize that this wasn't a healthy relationship, right? But at that point, she didn't. At that point, she loved him and she didn't want to get him in trouble. And getting him in trouble meant talking. To get him in trouble, it meant talking to me.
Right.
So.
And when you look at the research that's been going on for decades now, we know about how and why victims tell and talk. And we know that when they're not asked about it, they talk about it. They say, well, I was never asked. CPS came to my house, the police came to my house, and nobody ever asked me what happened to me. And so that's part of the forensic interview process, to allow a victim the opportunity to disclose at their own pace, in their own way, in their own words. And so if we don't allow them to know that we know something and it's okay for them to talk about in that place, we're not really truly acknowledging how we know and what we know about how and why and when children talk, and why victims and when victims tell us about what happened. So, go back to the research that, since the 80s had been talking about how and why victims talk, and that's what we're doing. So we're not doing anything out of the ordinary. We're actually not, what we're talking about right now with externally verifiable information, forget about bringing in evidence, forget about bringing in a folder with pictures, but all this externally verifiable information is what the national protocols have been talking about for years. And even the most researched protocol, the NICHD protocol, there's the most researched protocol in existence, says it's okay to bring in these statements. It's okay to acknowledge what you know. And it's research-based. So we know that what we're doing is still effective. We know what we're doing is not leading and not suggestive, but it's so hopefully that clarifies it. I know we went a little bit above and beyond with your question, Jen, but hopefully we got to it. Go ahead, Carly.
I also just wrote in the chat because Kathleen mentioned security camera footage. Absolutely, that could be used as evidence. Even better if you were able to watch it yourself and get a still shot that you're bringing in. But if that's not available for whatever reason, you could always introduce it as some type of verbal evidence for sure. So yeah, so open the scope to test the possibilities. There's so many different things that we can use and bring into our interviews that we're using as evidence. And honestly, doing that makes it easier for the child to talk about it. So that way we're not, asking them things that we already know. We don't ever want to set them up for failure like that. So definitely do your due diligence and look into the case and talk with your MDT about what do we know, so that you can be well prepared and bring that stuff into your interviews.
Looks like we have another question.
Yeah.
Said, you mentioned the most researched paper / author on the subject of introduction of evidence. Can you advise which paper or author you were referring to?
Yeah, so I wasn't referring to a research paper. I was referring to the most researched protocol in forensic interviewing. So that's the NICHD protocol. So when you think about the protocols that are very scripted, were done with Tom Lyons and Michael Lamb. Michael Lamb is actually the one who created the NICHD protocol. They're the ones who have the most research, because everything that they do is research. In their interview. So I would look at the NICHD protocol. And so Utah, the state of Utah, is the state that really uses the NICHD protocol to the fullest. And they have actually amended it to reflect and to introduce evidence now. And so that you can actually discuss and reflect on evidence in the interview in a researched way that allows for that to occur. So that's what I would, if you wanted to read up on that more. So there's NCAC protocol, there's APSAC, there's finding words, there's child first, and there's NICHD. There's the 10-step.
Allie, you froze a little bit.
You went completely black there for a second.
Allie, you still on with us?
Okay, so that's what I would refer to if you. Am I back? Hello?
Yep.
Yes, you're back.
You guys don't see me? Okay. Probably a good thing that I did that, because I'm coughing my lungs out. So you guys didn't have to hear all of that. All right. So is this me, guys?
Yep, go for it.
Okay. So let's talk about it a little bit. So when we're talking about the prepare and predict process, and we're talking about what we do, we're talking about victim-centered techniques and protocols. And we want to ensure that whatever is happening is being done in a victim-centered way, not in a target prosecution-centered way. So we want to make sure that when we're showing evidence or introducing evidence to the victim, we're doing it for them, because it's going to help them. It's going to liberate their secret. It's going to allow them to talk about something that has not been okay. It's not a law enforcement and prosecution on identifying the evidence, but it's really not taking into account that victim-centered manner and honoring that victim and allowing them to identify themselves and to disclose at their own pace and in their own way. By outing the victim to the parent and having them look at it, we're really taking away that thing that's so true to us as forensic interviewers, which we allow that narrative process, allow that victim to tell us their experience in their own words. And so by only going to the parents with that, it really doesn't facilitate what we do every single day in a child. And when we think about child sexual abuse cases, we know that you can't just say, "Daddy touched my pee-pee," and that's enough to take to the prosecution. You have to talk to them. You have to have that 7-year-old tell you everything. Tell me all about daddy touching your pee-pee. Tell me all about what that means. Tell me from the beginning, middle to the end, or however you guys do that. And that's because we're allowing them to tell us their experience in their own words. We explore alternate hypotheses. We think about, well, maybe daddy touching my pee-pee is not necessarily talking about the pee-pee being a private part. Maybe the pee-pee is the actual pee that they peed and daddy touched it because I sprinkled on the seat and daddy touched the seat after I peed and I had a little bit left over. You know what I mean? We explore that alternate hypothesis when we're doing child sexual abuse cases. We have to remember to do that with cases where you have evidence. We have to understand that's our purpose. Okay, we have to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And if we only are confirming what we know because we have a piece of paper or a picture that shows us something, we're limiting the scope of our victims telling us what happened in their own words. We're limiting that narrative and process from that victim. So we want to know, first and foremost, when we're using any type of evidence, if it's tangible, whether it's externally verifiable, what is our purpose, right? So the idea of a forensic interview, whether we have evidence or not, is the primary purposes of it would for that victim to tell us everything about that piece of evidence in their own words with their own ideas, right? Another possibility is we need 100% victim identification. So in order to think about why we need the child to identify, if we are giving that victim the ability to identify themselves in the picture, we're allowing them to actually talk about it. Okay, we're not hiding it. We're not shaming them. We're not blaming them. We're allowing them in a judgment-free environment, just like we do with all our forensic interviews, the ability to talk about that. So having them identify themselves 100% is so much more victim-centered than it is for having someone else identify it. So kind of like what I was talking about on the other slide. Also, by showing them evidence and talking about the evidence and letting them talk about it with you, we can confirm other producers, other targets, other suspects, other people who were involved in the crime. We can find out other victims, and we might be able to get some of that stuff without showing the evidence, but we'll definitely be able to show more when we do. So if you're looking at the picture on this slide right here, and you ask somebody, say, tell me all about it, and I raised my hand up, and tell me all about how this picture came to be. Well, my dad was there and he took it, and what did he take it with? And he took it with a phone, and you can start talking about that particular picture. And then you could talk about, tell me all about what happened in that fist. Tell me all about what happened after that picture was taken. And so you're getting all of that information, and the evidence is just assisting in the facilitation process of gathering that information. You're allowing the victim to disclose, not just assuming that we know, okay? Maybe she wasn't happy at all, but maybe she was told to pose that way. And giving that child the opportunity to disclose that is really important. So we don't go in with assumptions, just like any other forensic interview. We explore alternate hypothesis, which is like any other forensic interview, but we have some evidence that we might go in to talk about more specifically. We want to also be able to prepare that victim for what's about to happen and what's going to happen later on. So if there is a case where you have CSAM, you have to allow that victim to talk about it. You don't share with that victim that you know it exists. You don't, and they don't know anything about it. Let's say they don't disclose because we didn't, so someone says we didn't need to talk to that victim, we didn't need to show it to her because we have the proof. What happens when that case goes to trial? Let me tell you, those images go on a big screen for everyone in that courtroom to see. We don't want that to be the first time that that victim knows that people have seen their images and know about it. We want to give them a chance to be prepared. We want to honor them, respect them, and treat them with dignity to say, hey, this is what we know. Tell us everything from you about what happened. Okay, so the purpose behind presenting it is the purpose behind anything. We don't go into an interview without the purpose of what the forensic interview is about. And the same goes with the uses of evidence. So there's investigative purposes and there's victim purposes. For the investigation, using evidence is to ensure cooperation, get clarification about what's happened, and finding justice for that victim. For the victim itself, it's empowerment. It's allowing that victim to actually tell her experience in her words or his words, giving them back their voice that was taken away from them when they were forced to do these things that they didn't want to do, and honoring that victim with respect and dignity. And that's the purpose behind using evidence when we present it. Okay. So we're going to move on right now, unless there's any questions about that before we move on to like our pre-interview preparations. Any questions about the purpose behind why we would use evidence, why we would present it to a victim, why we would want to use it to gather and explore further details? No? Okay. So I will allow, am I passing the torch right now, you guys?
Nope, you have the next two.
Or am I continuing?
No, you're
I have
continuing.
the next two?
Yep.
Okay. So let's talk about what we're going to do to prepare for this interview. And I'll tell you right now that an interview that has evidence is a lot more time than 15 minutes before. Get assigned cases, and we had time slots. And let's say we had a 10 o'clock, a 12 o'clock, a 2 o'clock, and a 4 o'clock. And for the 2 o'clock, I would get in there 15 minutes before. I'd sit down with the team. They'd tell me a few things, and then I would go and do the interview. And when you have evidence and you're using it in your forensic interviews, this is where things are very different. That 15 minutes is not enough time to prepare what you need to do. So let's talk about it in terms of a case, okay? So on April 30th of 2018, on my birthday, because my birthday is April 30th, Maine ICAC received information regarding a possible child exploitation of a minor after a traffic stop involving target and a minor aged female. The ICAC was able to obtain consent for the cellular phone belonging to the target, the man driving the car. In the phone, sexually explicit images and acts being committed against what appears to be a minor aged female, similar to the girl that was in the car at the time of the vehicle that the traffic stop was found. Okay, that man, that target, admitted to engaging in sexual acts with the minor female who was in the victim at the time of the traffic stop. Okay, that minor was then placed in child protective custody, as no parents or guardians were able to be located and contacted. The phone was going to be analyzed further for additional further. So what do we know? How about into the chat, what do we know? What are some of the things that we absolutely know from the case summary that I just read to you? All right. Well, I will go ahead. I don't see that there's any. Oh, there we go. Confession. Okay, absolutely, Kathleen. So the target, the man that was arrested in that traffic stop, he confessed to engaging in sexual acts with a minor. Absolutely. There's phone evidence. Absolutely. So they got consent to look at the phone, and they found images on the phone. Absolutely. That's what we knew. What else do we know, guys? Thank you, Samantha, and thank you, Kathleen, for typing in there. What else do we know? We know there was a traffic stop, right? There's no caregivers. Thank you, Kathleen. And at least there could no caregivers that we were able to find at that time. And so Child Protective Services is involved, and placement was involved. So the child is in a placement other than with family right now. Okay. We also know the phone that they found those images on is going to be further analyzed. Okay. So they're going to hopefully have additional forensic evidence that can be looked at. We know that the minor and the and the adult are not necessarily related to anyone who was related to that child for placement. Okay, there's lots of things that we know. What do we want to know based off of that? We want to know, who is he to her, right? We want to know, how did they even did they meet? We want to know, are those images of her or are they of someone else? We want to know what else is on that phone, because we want to know what else we can find. Okay, and when he's admitting to engaging in sexual acts with that minor, when did that occur, and where, and how often, right? We want to know all this kind of stuff in order to be able to, bring the case forward. So what we have is some forensic evidence at this point in time. We have a phone, we have pictures on the phone, we have a confession, okay? And we have the police report of the traffic stop. But what do we still need? What do we still need that we don't have yet, you guys? Just, we have, I see the disclosures out there. So we have, we want, and what we need, what we want to know is if there's a disclosure from that victim, right? So not just the confession from the target, thank you, Kathleen, but the disclosure from a child. We want to know what that child has to say about everything that happened. Absolutely. A possible safe kit. Can you tell me a little bit more what that is? The DNA, so like a rape kit stuff. So, the DNA can be found on her body, absolutely, or in the vehicle. It doesn't even have to be on her body, absolutely. We want to know what else is on that phone. Is there contact information? We want to know lots of stuff, and what we need is to have that information so we can do the interview, a medical exam, 100%. The next thing you want to think about is who makes up that MDT. Remember, we were talking about the referral process, right? So like, is this a case that it's going to stick with your CAC and it's going to be a state prosecution only? Or is there potential for federal prosecution? And so who makes up your MDT? Do you have prosecutors on both ends, a federal prosecutor and a state prosecutor? You have the ICAC, and that's state police, but you also need to have a local detective. Do you need to have a federal investigator? Do you need to have the forensic interviewer at the CAC? Do you have to involve the CAC interviewer or the federal interviewer? Do you have an advocate? Do you have victim assistance? Do we need to get, medical personnel involved who are part of the MDT too, because they maybe saw that child or did the evidence kit, or maybe there was some statements made at the medical exam, different things like that. So you have to think about who's going to make up that MDT. And when you think about that, how do we get them to the table? Remember, Emily was talking about who sits at the table. Who has a need to know? So of that MDT, there are people who have information to share, and there's people who have to be shared information with. And who is that? So for example, child protection is involved. So CPS is involved. And we know there's images. So the child protection worker might need to know that there's images there and to be able to work their case. So we have to be really, really careful with who has the need to know, need to see, what information can be shared. The other thing is, if he's in custody and the child's safe, do we need to rush into an interview automatically? Or do we want to wait a day or two until we can get some more forensic evidence so that we can use that in our investigation? And sometimes you're not sure, and that's talking with your law enforcement and figuring that out. That's when you consult with us to figure out, like, okay, so what do we do? Like, who needs to be involved? Can we wait? Do we need to act now? So if you have a case where safety is an issue, waiting is not an option. Safety is more important, and you have to act now. And if you have to have a subsequent later interview later with additional information, then you do that. And so the interview has to take part quickly. But if you can wait, if there's not an immediate need or risk of harm in the next 24 hours, then you can wait and do the interview a day later, because maybe in a day we'll have all the evidence from the phone. Maybe that's something to consider. And those are the things you will have to do. And then also remember who will interview that victim. Should it be a CAC interviewer or should it be a federal forensic interviewer? And remember to take the excitement. Sometimes these cases are really exciting. And that shouldn't be the determining factor of who does the interview. It should be who's the best person to interview and for what reasons. So for example, when I worked at the Chicago CAC, it was exciting when we would get a case like this come in because we didn't see those very often. But if I had someone who had a lot more experience doing it, that might be the person who should be doing that case, not just because it's exciting to do it. And so those are the types of things that we need to think about. If I haven't done a child sexual abuse, straight up child sexual abuse case in so long. Can I do it? Absolutely. But you would be the best person to do that, not me. So I also have to remember that. So who is the best person to do that interview?
Allie, can I just add something really quick before we go to
Yeah.
the next slide? So I know that locally, a lot of CACs have CSEC teams. These are teams that primarily handle kids that are high risk, confirmation of exploitation. They come from CPS referrals. So when we're thinking about those MDT teams, it can look a little bit differently at what's okay at a CAC level versus what's okay at a federal level. For example, there's a lot of information that's shared that's great, but federally we have to be really, really careful about how we share that information and who sits at the table. So in those situations, more than anything, please reach out. And even if it's not our case, we can talk about it. We can try and kind of strategize, because chances are if you have a kid who's coming for high risk behaviors, some kind of confirmed exploitation, it's going to go into the federal nexus. And we really want to make sure that the information that's provided is something that's not going to be detrimental to the kid at the federal level.
Absolutely. That's a great point, Emily. Thank you. And this is why it's so important to have these working relationships. So Emily works with you guys all the time, and she knows some of the things, the ins and outs and different things that happen in Maine. So that's the other great thing about having us as partners in this, because we can help work through some of these troubleshooting issues. And so I see, as a brand new interviewer, I appreciate the option and support for a more experienced interviewer immensely. Thank you, Kathleen. Like, I think that's really important. Like, you have to learn somehow, right? So we're not going to say you should never do a case because you have to learn it somehow, but there's a process of learning. And so if you have something that's you can observe for the first time, and then maybe the second time you take a more active role. Like, so I'm in Denver right now visiting my nephew who's going to be 1 year old. And last night, I got here last night, and my sister-in-law says, do you want to feed him? And I go, you know what? I want to watch you do it first. And I want to learn from what I watch and what I observe. Because she's the expert at feeding her son. I want to see how she feeds her son. How I might feed a child might be different. And I want to make sure that I'm doing it right. It's the same with interviewing, right? Like, yeah, I would love to feed him avocado, but how do I feed him the avocado the way you feed him the avocado? I know it's silly to make that connection, but it is, like the first time we do something, we're not going to be the best at it, but it's not about us. It's about that victim. So we want to make sure that that victim is getting what that victim needs in order to make that better. So thank you, Kathleen, for saying that. So let's talk about this, about like preparing that evidence. So we talked about on the last time with the case scenario about the things that we want to know, what we need to do. What's really important here is that 15 minutes isn't enough time when you have 100 pages of chats or 30 different photos to review and things like that. You need to be really informed. So if your CAC protocol is not to go going in with basic information, not really knowing everything. For these types of cases that we're talking about, where you have to present evidence, that's not going to be able to work. You have to go in fully informed. You need to know what to expect and how to be prepared for that. So you have to have time to review the evidence with your MDT. It's a joint activity between you and police, and you're going to sit down and review it and select what you're going to use in the interview, if anything at all. Maybe there's lots of stuff to review, but you're not going to bring anything in there. You need to do that with your MDT. You have to do that and have time to do that. Things have to be prepared. And so you need time for that. If things have to be printed, if things have to be masked or cropped, all those things are things that you have to think about in order to make things happen, and you need time to do that. So you have to not only be able to do that, and so your team has to be able to to bring the case to you a little bit sooner, but you have to be willing to look at these images, willing to read these chats, willing to have this stuff happen for you. Because if you're not willing to look at it, you can't do these interviews. It's not for everyone. I don't think that everyone should be obligated to do CSAM cases. Not everyone is okay with seeing it, and not everyone is okay with talking about it. So we shouldn't actually, just like we shouldn't force a victim to talk, we can't force an interviewer to be okay with the content of this. So just because you're a forensic interviewer doesn't mean you're made of steel. It doesn't mean that you can handle all aspects of everything. So if you know that this is something that's going to be really hard for you, I think you need to acknowledge that, and CAC should be understanding of that of their interviewers, okay? When you're selecting the evidence, you want to use as little as possible. So just because you have 100 pages of chats doesn't mean you have to bring 100 pages into that interview. Okay, so you have to be mindful, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that part in a little bit. You have to take into account the victim's age, issues with their mental health, and knowledge of the evidence. You need to know all of that before you go into the interview. You have to be prepared for that. I'm sorry, you guys. All right. Is this still me?
If you need a break, I can take over for a little bit. I have the next slide.
Can you?
Okay.
I'm sorry, I can't stop
Yeah,
talking.
don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. Carly, are you okay with that too?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
Actually, Emily,
So-
I have a couple of questions if you don't mind
Yeah,
taking before
sure.
you start.
Absolutely.
So this is questions for the group. Within your model, are you informing victims prior to coming to the CAC that there will be evidence presented, or that they will be coming to talk specifically about their case? Also, are you required to stay a neutral forensic interviewer throughout the case, as we are within the NCA CAC model?
Yeah, so
Go ahead.
do you want to answer? Or do you
Go ahead. You go ahead.
Okay. We're always neutral. Having evidence or knowing about something does not take away our neutrality. So if we are not being neutral, that's a problem. Like, part of being a forensic interviewer is being a neutral fact finder. So you might have information, but that doesn't mean that you can't be neutral about it. That means you don't put opinions. That means you don't make assumptions. That means you don't place judgment when talking with someone. So yes, you want to always remain neutral. As for informing them ahead of time of that there's evidence presenting, no. Just like any other interview, like, you don't explain to the family before they come what your protocol is and how you go about your questions and how you go about asking your questions, because that's not what you do. You do that because this is your role and this is what you're trained in doing, but you don't ask for permission to ask information in a narrative format. You don't tell them that, how you're going to ask questions, and that you don't write out a script, right? Necessarily. So if you're using NCAC protocol, then you're going to follow the NCAC guidelines and whatever protocol that you're using, and that doesn't change. So you don't have to give information about what you're going to do in the interview prior to doing it. So hopefully that answers the question. I see a question from Michael that says, has there ever been an issue with a forensic interviewer? Go ahead.
It's a great question. So I think it really talks to the fact that we are never really in possession of CSAM outside of an interview. Law enforcement always has to have it. So we have it during, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump in, Allie. I just saw it and I'm like,
no, perfect.
We always have to be in the presence of law enforcement to have CSAM on our possession. For example, I cannot travel with it. I cannot have it on my computer. Once an interview is done, I have to hand it right back to law enforcement. It's, you can actually get in trouble for going around with CSAM if you're not law enforcement.
Yeah, so there's something called care, custody, and control. And there's actual laws about the care, custody, and control, the Adam Walsh Act and different things like that, that explain that a forensic interviewer in the care custody can have the forensic interview in the care, custody, control of law enforcement. So when an interviewer is using evidence, the police have to be there at all times. You can't walk away with it. You can't take it to the bathroom with you. You know, the police have to be attentive to what's going on. But because you're a forensic interview and you're doing an investigative interview, you're allowed to be in possession of it in that moment, as long as care, custody, and control is still being taken advantage of by the police. So if you do remote interviewing where law enforcement doesn't have to be present and they can remote view from another location, you cannot be presenting evidence because you can't have it alone. They have to be there to do it. So those are some issues that will come up. And you can look up the Adam Walsh Act and look at some of the laws that have to do with that. And every state has additional laws as well. So Maine is going to have some additional laws as to how it reflects to what you do every single day.
Yeah. Okay. So moving on, unless there's any other questions, whenever we're looking at evidence and choosing evidence, we have to be really deliberate about what we choose. There has to be a purpose behind it. For example, am I showing an image of a child in a room because the agent wants to establish that that picture was taken in her bedroom, right? Versus am I showing a picture of an image of a child who has no clothing on because I want to have her identify herself in that picture. So everything that I do, everything that I choose has a purpose. It cannot be just, I hate to say this, but for shock value, right? To have a kid talk about things. Sometimes when search warrants are conducted, objects may be retrieved. I'm never going to bring an object into a room with a kid. I'm going to actually have pictures taken of those objects for a number of different reasons. What if that kid destroys that evidence? On top of it, kind of, you never know what it would be. And you definitely don't want to bring something that was used on a child in an interview. I also am very, very careful about how much I present, right? Because it can be very overwhelming. We've already told you that we, on average, are looking at thousands of pages of chats, hundreds of pictures, maybe videos. So I go piece through piece and choose what it is that I want to do. For example, with a video, I may just choose one still of that video. Now, the way that I describe that video when I'm talking to the kid will be a little bit different, but I'm very, very careful because too much can be overwhelming and can stunt your whole interview and can shut your kid down to the point where they're like, I'm done. I'm not talking about this anymore. Too little may make it so that you aren't corroborating the allegations. You're not getting at what is needed to meet the federal statute, and you're not giving that kid an opportunity to really talk about their experience in its totality, or however much they want to share with you. Because sometimes what can happen is, just like in a regular CSEC and regular CAC interview, kids will only tell you some things, right? They may not tell you everything. The great thing about this evidence is that it gives almost the kid an opportunity to be like, oh, I didn't think I was going to tell you that, but here it is. And so they talk about something that we didn't even know about. Did you guys want to add anything to that, or I think I went through
Nope.
this. Okay, so a lot of these things I already went through. Like I said, use the least amount. You can have hundreds of images, but you don't need hundreds of images. Maybe you need an image where the child can identify herself, can identify the target. Maybe you need an image that's going to identify a different act or something else that may have happened so that there can be multiple charges. You want to try, when you're looking at images, you want to try and pick images where the kid is not smiling. For obvious reasons, mainly being, you know, it can cause a certain emotions in the kid, you know. I'm trying to find the words for it. Allie, help me out.
Yeah, so one of the reasons we say this is because the little research that there is about this is evidence of adults who were victims as children. And when they're recalling to their therapists about it, they talk about the images and they were ashamed or embarrassed or felt judgment because they thought that people thought they liked it when they were smiling. When in reality, maybe they were told to smile, or in reality, you know, there was lots of different reasons why they were smiling. So we try to, if we have two cases that are pictures that are very, very similar in nature, and ones where they're smiling and ones where it's not, we try to choose the one where they're not to do that. However, smiling pictures are not bad. So if all you have is a smiling picture, please use it. And it's also important to understand, and that's why this is so important, not to make assumptions and just assume because we have an image, we know everything. That's not the case. Find out what's going on. So if we had a human trafficking case where, you know, you see this woman, well, she was like cozying up to the trafficker, smiling and like being so happy. And she explained that, like, see how I'm smiling there? Let me tell you all about that. Every month he would have this party. And at that party, he would have us, you know, people can take us, and, you know, you never knew what was going to happen. You never knew who was going to be there. You never knew how they were treating. Every month at this party, he would choose one of us. And one of us got to go home with him. Mm-hmm. And we all wanted to be that person. The reason that we all wanted to be that person is because we knew what to expect. So he might be horrible and terrible, but on that night, we wanted to be with him because we knew what was going to happen. We knew where we were going to sleep that night. We knew what we were going to encounter that night. And so we were making him want to choose us. So we were smiling up and cozying up to him because that was important, so that we didn't have to go home with strangers and we didn't have to have sex with 10 different men that night. And so there's a reason for the smiling pictures too. So make sure that you look at that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And alternatively,
and you acknowledge that there's a.
Sorry, Allie, you froze for a minute. Alternatively, you know what? I had a case with a little one where there were pictures of him smiling, and I chose not to present the images of him smiling, but I verbally talked about it with him. And he looked at me and he said, I didn't want to do that. He made me do that. He said I had to smile in those pictures, that I had to make it look like I was happy. Now, I deliberately chose not to show that image, but I was still able to get at the fact that this target was coercing this little guy and manipulating him and grooming him in horrible, horrible ways. And it was just another way that it showed that relationship. So you know what? You can use it when you bring evidence in to an interview. You can choose not to use it. You can choose to do it verbally versus showing an image. It's really about the feel of the room. And I know all of the interviewers on this call can relate on that. You know what's happening in that room. You can feel the tension and anxiety and understand if maybe you need to pull back a little bit. You want to avoid the same picture or the same image of something. Once you have a kid in their room, you don't need to show them 10 images of them in their room. If there's a purpose for why you're doing that, for example, not to be very explicit, but if a target is asking them to insert something, right? And you want to determine that that's happened, and the kid is already identified in their room being without clothing, but you want to get at them at the target, asking them to insert an object, maybe you show that. Maybe you don't. You really have to make choices in the moment, even if all the presentation, all the preparation in the world prior to interview and you're set on the images that you're presenting, you can get into an interview and have it completely change. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is the images that we use are printed in high quality color. The reason is because if I'm showing a blurry image and that kid looks at me and goes, that's not me, where do I go from that? Now the kid is already denied that that's them. I know it's them because I saw it on a computer screen, but the quality of what we had wasn't great, right? So it gives them an opportunity to deny. Next slide.
Hey, can I jump in, Emily?
Yeah.
And that's to say, like, this is all like best practice, right? So keep in mind though, that if the only image that you can get, or the only one that law enforcement is able to print is in black and white, for example, we're not just going to say we're not going to use it just because it's not in color. You know, we're going to use what we have, and after we, you know, exhaust all of our other options. So I actually had to do that recently, where I was able to look at the picture in color, but the image that I had in the interview was black and white. So you know, just preparing for the interview in that way. So I was able to describe the image in color, but then let the victim know that, like, the image I'm going to show you is in black and white. And then real quick too, just to note that we are never going to take in a full video as evidence in interviews, that we're always wanting to take screenshots in the video. So I didn't hear you guys mention that. So I wanted to make sure that we're never bringing in videos, always screenshots.
Yeah, thank you, Carly. And then the other thing that I wanted to talk about was sanitizing images, right? Sometimes people may think it's kind to bring a sanitized image, and there's actually a couple of slides that are going to go into this more explicitly, but it actually can be harmful to the kid, right? Because you spend so much time in the beginning saying, I can hear anything you want to say to me, I'm not judging, I just want to make sure you're okay. And when you present the child with a sanitized image, it can feel like you're not ready to hear this. You don't want to hear my experience. I can't talk to you about those body parts. And it can actually stunt the level of information that you get. It can actually detract from what you've done. Because Carly actually gave me this example earlier, Allie, and I so want you to use it because it's fantastic. I've never used the beach ball one. So I want you to talk about that.
Yeah, so if you look at this slide, we're talking about sanitized versus the original. And so what Emily was talking about is sometimes we sanitize things because we think that's best for the victim. But you have to understand, who is it best for? Usually it's the comfort of the team that's uncomfortable with showing them the image versus the victim seeing it for themselves. Most of the time our victims already have seen these images or know they exist, or oftentimes even taking them themselves. So we have to remember that. The level of comfort, generally, we're not thinking about them, we're thinking about what our level of comfort is, and we have to remove ourselves from that. So when we use images that are cropped or masked or something like that, we do recommend that we use Post-it notes over permanently sanitizing something. Because when you permanently sanitize something, you can't actually remove it. And it can actually encourage denials, it can encourage reluctance, it can encourage the inability to further disclose. So what I mean by that is, if you're going to physically alter something permanently, you have to be sure that you acknowledge that it's been altered, because if you don't, it can cause issues in disclosure. So the example that Emily wants me to share with you is that we were doing an interview and the agent came and permanently sanitized these pictures. And so he created, you know, when you can put like a circle or like a shape over a part of the picture. And so he put this like blue ball over the child's genitals. And so in the part of the process of disclosure, and we're talking and the image is shown, the child says, see, he didn't touch me, because right before he was going to touch me, I grabbed that beach ball and I put it right in between us so he couldn't get to me. So actually what we did there was we created a situation where now we have a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old, I can't remember how old he was, that has created a different story of what happened because it was easier than actually saying what did happen because we sanitize it in that manner. If we are going, sometimes you don't have control over that because your law enforcement is going to bring it to you and it's already been sanitized. You have to be sure that when you're describing the image, and we're going to talk about that, you are acknowledging and telling the victim it's been altered. So instead of presenting the image and saying this is a picture of a boy and he's outside by the pool, you would say this is a picture of a boy, he's outside by the pool and he doesn't have any clothes on, but that part of his body is covered up by a blue dot, you know, and you acknowledge that so that he knows what you know, instead of making the assumption that because he doesn't know what you know. And so you have to acknowledge that to him. So that's the story of that. So we really actually encourage, if you're going to sanitize, to use Post-it notes. They're easily removable. And you can use them in a way that's still just as effective, but actually better. And so when you're working with victims, they have a right to see their images. There are not very many people who have a right to see the images, but the victims are one of them. And the other person is the defendant at the time of the trial. Okay, that's it. Those are the people who have the right to see the pictures. So if we permanently block it and the victim wants to see the picture as it was, we can't show it to them because it's permanently blocked. But if we use a Post-it note and they want to see the whole thing, they can remove the Post-it and look at it because they have that right to do so. If you are going to use Post-it notes, which is what we highly recommend, we encourage that law enforcement take a picture of that so that the law enforcement, because by the time it goes to the prosecution, into the court, the stickiness of that Post-it note probably isn't going to last so well, or maybe it got moved, or maybe it got altered. So we want to actually have photographic evidence of exactly how we sanitize and what was shown to the child. And they don't have to worry about taking a picture and it being taking a picture of CSAM, because it's sanitized, it's no longer CSAM. So they don't have to worry about that, but it's highly recommended that they do take that picture anytime sanitation is used. There's a lot of different perspectives on sanitizing. APSAC defers to HSI Prepare and Predict method. They also defer to the FBI method. So they know that we are the experts when it comes to presenting evidence, and we've been the ones doing it for a long period of time, and they defer to us. The Michigan protocol is another huge protocol, a national protocol, and they do not encourage permanent sanitizing. They say actually no permanent sanitizing should be used on their cases. NCAC is case by case. So they say it depends on the case whether you should or should not sanitize. NCJTC and Fox Valley are dependent on the case. And it's an MDT decision. And H absolutely avoid it. And this is when you're presenting to anybody else. Okay, this is just strictly to victims. Carly, do you want to take this? Is this your slide? Or is it mine?
I definitely can jump in. Yeah, it doesn't matter. So yeah, when preparing evidence to present to witnesses is a little different than victims. We don't ever want to show the person that we're interviewing a nude image of someone else. We want to be sure who we're presenting to and what we're presenting. Good example, actually, I had a case a couple weeks ago where I showed the 17-year-old just kind of like a profile image, so just like a picture of the face, and we were pretty sure it was her. But when I presented it to her, she said, "That's not me." So then I got a little concerned that because my next image was going to be a nude image, and I was like, oh, well, maybe this isn't her either. So it was nice that I had those Post-it notes in my folder ready to go to put on the breasts and the vagina, because I wasn't sure it was her. So now I'm going to present this image to her as a witness potentially. So always being sure to be prepared for that. And actually, when I showed her that image, she did identify that it was her, but then she had the opportunity to look under the Post-it notes to look at the full image, because that's her right as the victim in the image. So when we're doing this with people that we don't know to be in the image, it's really important to keep that in mind.
Yeah, and so if you are showing, if the law enforcement has to show the picture to a parent for identification, if we're not sure who this person is and they're using this picture to show to someone else, we actually highly recommend to permanently sanitize, knowing that you're not showing it to the victim themselves. We, crop it out, so it'll be something like this. What we don't want you to do is this. We don't want you to go and show a picture to someone who isn't the victim, because what are they looking at? They're looking directly at the genitals. In this, they're like, oh my God, this is a naked girl. They're not looking at the face for identification purposes. So what we recommend is this, to permanently crop it. So it's not even masked or sanitized, it's just cropped, so that when you're asking them to identify someone, they're identifying the purpose is to identify the face, the person behind it, or a piece of jewelry or something to that effect. All right, so we're gonna move on because I want to get to the fun stuff. We've got, so as Emily mentioned earlier, we have the HSI Prepare and Predict method. And what basically their method is this, okay? To allow the interviewer prepares the victim. That's why it's called Prepare and Predict. We're preparing the victims for the evidence that will be presented while giving them an opportunity to predict what it is they're about to see, hear, and or discuss. Prepare and predict. So we want to make sure that that person that you're talking to is prepared for what's going to happen, and giving them an opportunity through the words and through the things that we're doing, predict the process that comes next, so they're not blindsided. In the Prepare and Predict method, we have one kind of constant that's always there, is if we're going to be presenting evidence tangibly and bringing evidence into the room, right from the beginning, that evidence is acknowledged and then put away. So we're not going to take out the folder and show everything that's in it, but we're going to acknowledge right from the beginning that we have a folder with some pictures in it that we might want to talk about later, but I'm going to put it away because I want to get to know you better, and you build your rapport and you do your whole process, okay? The other ways you can incorporate Prepare and Predict is throughout the interview process, right? So maybe you have to transition to topic of concern with the evidence because that person doesn't know why they're there. Maybe they're not in active disclosure. Maybe they're not in the disclosure process yet, or they don't know why they're there because the discovery of the images happened first and they haven't actually told anyone yet. And so you might have to introduce what you know or introduce with photos. You also can use it to elicit a disclosure and to enhance, they're struggling with what happened and you have a picture about the event that they're talking about. Maybe you want to bring in a picture at that point so that they can enhance the narrative, so they can talk more about what's happening because they have something to look at and to reference, okay? You also can use disclosed and they've already given you a lot of information and they're talking about a vehicle or they're talking about a couch and you have a picture of a vehicle or a couch or something to that effect in your folder. You might want to make sure that they're talking about the same thing that you have. So use it to clarify what they've already said, okay? What's really, really, really important is that we're never really asking a yes/no question to something we know the answer to. For example, if you have pictures in your folder, and in that folder, the pictures are of that minor, you're not going to ask the child if pictures were ever taken of them because you know that they were, because you have them in your folder. So you're setting them up to fail. A yes, no, they can say no, pictures were never taken to me. And now you have this folder with pictures in there and you have to confront them with that. If you know that they were contacted by your suspect via Instagram, and you know that because you have either pictures or direct messages from Instagram that you're going to use, you shouldn't ask if they have an Instagram because you know that they do. So you want to be careful not to ask that yes/no question to stuff that you already know the answer to, and you want to be really, really clear about that. So with HSI's Prepare and Predict, we use 3 stages or 3 phases of the interview. It's pretty similar to what most people have. So in our first phase is our introduction and rapport building process, our ground rules, our expectations, and then narrative and then practice. Our stage 2 is that transition into that topic of concern and more of the allegation specific questions that you're asking about. And that third phase is question, clarification, and closure. Okay, so what we're going to talk about is how you can use evidence in each one of those phases. So as we said, our golden rule is pretty much anytime we're bringing in physical evidence, we're going to bring it in and introduce the folder right at the bat. In the next segment, we're going to talk about how to do that. So I don't want you to worry about that yet. But this is an always thing. If you have tangible evidence in a folder that you bring into the room, it's introduced right at the get-go, right at the beginning of phase 1. You could also use it, like I said, in phase 2, right? So you can maybe use it to transition into the topic. So maybe asking them, tell me all about how come you're here today, doesn't get you to anything. And we talked about not waiting 45 minutes to get to the topic of concern. You can actually bring it up sooner and talk about it there. If there's not already a pre-disclosure or there's not already, you know, understanding of why they're there, you can use this in phase 2 to be able to get more information. And then the third way to use it is in phase 3, where you use the evidence to clarify statements, like I said, and finally, always leaving that door open for future information. So I don't remember if it was Carly or Emily who earlier talked about not getting everything in an interview. You're never going to get everything. So that's a figure of speech saying, oh, I talked to him and I got everything about what happened. Well, we're never really going to get everything ever. Because every time that someone tells you about a story, they remember and tell you different things. So we want to keep that door open for future conversations. So if they remember something later that they didn't remember at the time, they can come and talk to you. If the investigation's ongoing and you have additional information that you want to ask them about, that door is open so you can talk again. You want to assess for that willingness to talk if something was happening, and acknowledge that the way memory works in our brain and trauma is that not everyone is ready to talk. So it goes back to the question that was asked earlier, like, if you introduce it, aren't you forcing someone to talk about it? And the answer is no. And this is where you leave that door open so they can come and talk about it at a later time if they choose to, okay? Always remember too, this is really, really, really important, to really know how your cameras capture you in the room. So if you're using CSAM, you don't want the video to capture the image in the video of a recording of your interview, because then you're creating child pornography. So you have to be really, really careful of that. So know ahead of time the body positioning you have to have in order to not capture the actual pictures on video, okay? That's easily done by going in with a fake folder and a fake picture and non-CSAM image and testing what can my video camera see. Like some of you guys have amazing cameras these days where you can actually like zoom in and move and all that kind of stuff. With these CSAM cases, you don't want the people in the observation room to be able to do that because you don't want them to zoom in on it, okay? Remember and always know how to position your evidence. How are you gonna hold it? How are you gonna be in control of that folder when it's time to use it? Remember what Emily said about preparing the evidence and using individual pieces of evidence at all times. You wanna make sure that you are comfortable with what's in your folder. And always remember all the things that you're going to want to do in any other forensic interview, you're going to do here. So think about all the typical considerations that you're going to have in any forensic interview, and remember to apply them in an interview with evidence presenting. Nothing has changed in that, okay? So hopefully by this point, we have given you victim-centered presenting evidence techniques, and you're able to identify appropriate situation in which evidence presenting should be used, how to select and prepare your evidence for the interview process, and how to effectively use it. And we did that through going through identifying the science of it, pre-interviewing preparations, and the HSI Prepare and Predict method. So what's next is now we're going to talk about the art. We're going to talk about how to go about doing it and what we're going to, and how to actually apply it. So we know about what it looks like. We understand why we're doing things. Now we're going to actually learn to apply it. So again, Emily's number is incorrect, but she texted you the correct number. I say let's take a quick 5 to 10 minute bio break so that everyone can pee and stretch your legs and move around. What time is it?
It is 11:37.
Get out of here. Okay, 11:37. Why don't we come back at 11:45? Just everyone run to the bathroom, do what you need to do, and we'll take it from there. And I will do the same. And when I come back, Annette, I will, I'm going to stop sharing.
All right. Okay, so we're recording, we're good. Thank you guys for your patience. I'm gonna get through this and we're going to get into presenting evidence now and the actual art of it. And so our motivation for this is for you guys to really understand the art of it, for you guys to really understand what we're talking about. You've got the science. We talked to you about the purpose, because without the purpose, we can't go on. But this is really the art of putting the science into action, right? So how does this play into our interviews? So by the end of this presentation, and given examples of victim-centered presenting evidence techniques, you guys will be able to identify when and how to use evidence presenting effectively in your interview using the HSI Prepare and Predict method. Okay, that's our end goal. To get there, we're going to identify the stages of the forensic interview, including where and how to introduce the evidence. And then we're going to prepare for the unexpected, okay, with what we already know. Our agenda is pretty similar to what we've done so far. We're going to review the past. We're going to talk about evidence and how it can be utilized. We're going to examine this, oh, it says the science here, but it's really the art. And we're going to share strategies and talk about things. And we want you guys to ask questions like you've already been doing. That makes it so much better. So what is our prerequisite knowledge? What are we already coming to the table with? The stuff we just talked about. Okay, you guys are coming to the table now because you know, and you're armed with the understanding of what the prepare and predict method is. You know that it's a way to prepare the victims so that they have an opportunity to predict what's going to be happening next. You know that. We talked about the 3 phases of the HSI Prepare and Predict method. And I'm assuming, because most of the protocols are very similar, that your stages or your phases are pretty similar somewhere in here. You might not call it 3, you might call it 8, you might call it 5, but somewhere within this, it's pretty similar to what you're doing, to what you guys are doing. And we're not teaching you to change your protocol, okay? We want you to know that. We're teaching you how to insert prepare and predict into your current method. So you guys already have an art. You guys are great at what you do. And we don't want to take your current art away from you. We want to enhance the art that you're doing and to make your interviews that much better. Okay, this is we just talked about this. We talked about not asking questions we know the answers to with yes or no, show the evidence right at the beginning, okay? And I would love for this to work, but it doesn't appear. But so my coworker, Rachel, she talks about the art as folding in the cheese. So I don't know how many of you are Schitt's Creek fans, but I am a huge Schitt's Creek fan. I know Carly is as well. And if you ever saw the episode of Folding in the Cheese, that's what we want you to do. The art of forensic interviewing is your ability to fold in the cheese, to get there. To be able to do this art, you need to know how and to fold in the cheese. So that's what that is. So let's continue. Let's look at it. We identified the stages, and now we're going to talk about really getting in there, the nitty-gritty. So we talked about if you're having an evidence folder in your interview, you want to bring it in right from the start. So the moment you walk into the room, that folder's in your hand. We're not telling you to open it and present it. We're telling you to acknowledge it, keep it closed, being honest with the victim right from the get-go about what you have in your, that you have a folder, that you're going to use it, and you build your rapport process, okay? So use this example of consider, my name is Allie and it's my job to talk with people. I have a folder here with some photos in it that I may want to talk with you about later, but first I'm gonna put it aside for now, but first I just want to get to know you better. And then you just start your process. So you acknowledge it. It's one sentence. You're not really going into a huge thing. You're acknowledging it and you're putting it away. And by saying I have some photos, or I have some still shots from a video, or I have a chat, you're being specific as to what you have in your folder. You're not being vague, so that they can actually prepare and predict right from the beginning. They're saying, ooh, she's got some photos. Like, she has the photos, she knows. And so they know right from the beginning that you have the stuff, and you want to get to know them first. You want to talk to them. And so the most common question I get when I say this, but don't they want to see it right away? Don't they want to know what's in there? What if they just want to see what you have in your folder? And that almost never happens. I'm never going to say, I don't say never. I'm one of those people who just don't use the word never when I'm presenting, because I always believe that there's going to be some exception to that rule, but it hardly ever happens. And the reason it hardly ever happens is because they know that those photos are what they are, and they know about what those photos are. They know that there's naked photos in your folder, and they don't want to look at it and talk about it right then and there. They're going to want to talk. They don't even know if they're ever going to really want to talk to you about it. So no, they don't ask you about it. But by saying I have photos, you're preparing them for what's to come later. And so by building your regular rapport and doing your introduction and doing narrative event practice and doing your first phase, you are allowing them to say, wait, she's got these naked photos of me in her folder, but she's still interested in talking to me. She still wants to know about what I like to do. And it's showing genuine interest in them. And it's automatically the judgment and the blame and the shame is starting to be eliminated, because you're still as interested as you are, even though you know about the photos in your folder. So that's why it's so important to have that. So I'm going to show you a clip. Some of the clips are actors and some of them are real videos. So this is actually an actor, so you'll see the face and all that, but it's just to give you an idea of introduction and rapport of what it might look like. Come on in, and you can have a seat right over there. All right. Well, like I told you before, my name is Allie, okay, and it's my job to talk with people. And this is what I do all day long. Today I get to talk with you, okay? But the most important thing that I want you to know is that while we talk today, you're not in any trouble whatsoever for being here. And there's nothing that you can say that'll get you in trouble with me or the people that I work with, okay? While we're talking, I am video recording everything that we say. And that's because I want to be able to know exactly what you say, what I say, exactly how it was. I don't really take any notes, and so I want to be able to remember everything. Okay, the camera's right over there. And also, the people I work with, Julie and Todd, they're in the other room. And they can actually see and hear us right now, so they can know what we're talking about as well. We do it that way because we think it's easier to talk one-on-one than in a room full of people. So at some point, I might take a break and go talk with them, see if I have any other questions, see if they have any other questions, and go from there, okay? I have a folder. In this folder, I have some photos, some chats, some phone logs that I might want to talk to you about in a little bit. But I'm going to put it aside for now, because I just want to get to know you a little bit, see who I'm talking to. All right? So what did you guys notice? So what are some of the things that you guys picked up on? Go ahead and put it in the chat. Carly, what did you notice?
So I noticed your very monotone, very comforting voice. And I mean, your introduction was just as, normal as your regular CAC type interviews.
Yeah.
Same process.
And it has some people put in there casual reference to evidence, address the obvious folder, and that was when what was inside, then directed attention away from it to discuss it later. Absolutely. And, you know, everything about it is just a normal process. One of the reasons I say I may talk about later, that's one of the things I want you to pick up on, is that I may talk about it or I might not. Like maybe the purpose of it was to have it there in case I needed it. And if he's talking to me and he tells me everything, I might not need to bring it out. The other thing is, remember, I'm not being vague. I was actually pretty specific about what was in there. And the reason I'm specific about what's being in there is so that he doesn't have to wonder what's in the folder. So he knows I've got phone logs, he knows I have chats, and he knows I have photos so that he can prepare for when it's coming up. But if I say I have some things in this folder that I might want to talk to you about, that's going to get the question, well, what things? What do you have in there? What's going on? So that's really, really important and a good, important thing to remember. So you don't want to be, you're not going to say, I have photos of you naked in this folder that I want to talk to you about later, okay? But you do want to say, I have photos. You don't want to say I have things, okay? So that's kind of the one takeaway. So let me give you another example of what it might sound like and look like.
So let me explain to you a little bit about the room. And I'll tell you again, my name is Allie, okay? And like I said to you before, it's my job to talk with people. And so that's all we're gonna do in this room. We're just gonna talk for a little bit. You're not in any trouble whatsoever with me or Jim or the people I work with. Just want to talk with you, hear a little bit from you, and that's pretty much it. You'll be on your way and you'll leave here with your parents, okay? There is a video camera recording. This is a camera, and the reason I record it is I don't really take notes while we talk. I want to be able to know exactly what we said to each other if we have to remember down the line. Okay, so this is the best way to do it. And so I'm going to say for the camera that my name is Allie Levy, and we're just going to talk a little bit. I have a folder here, and in this folder I have some notes, some chats, some pictures, and I want to talk to you about that in a little bit. Okay, but first, I just want to know who I'm talking to. Before I get into anything, I just like to know.
Okay, so it's pretty similar in my fake interview and my real interview. They're pretty much the same. And I want to point out that Kathleen didn't mention that I say you're not in any trouble with me. And so that might not be something that you guys do in your everyday interviews. Working for a law enforcement agency and working for Homeland Security, sometimes that can be really intimidating. So as a rule, we acknowledge that and we let them know they're not in trouble with us at the get-go. That might not be something that you guys need to do or feel you need to do, but it's something you can do. And I want you guys to know that if you would know ahead of time, because a mom was talking to you, that their child's really, really nervous about being in trouble, that might be a really great way to set them at ease and let them know that it's okay. So we do actually acknowledge it in pretty much all of our interviews, but you may not have to, but it's okay to know that you can. Anything different in this interview that you noticed than the other one? Or anyone of you want to have any questions or anything like that? No? Okay. Feel free to, at any point, ask the questions. And so one of the things, so that was phase one, right? So that was your intro, your rapport building, your, you do your expectations or the rules or the guidelines, whatever you guys call them in your center. And you do a narrative event practice. And now you're transitioning into phase two, which is transitioning to topic of concern. So most of the time in your everyday interviews, you're going to say, tell me how come you're here today, or tell me the reason you're here today, or tell me what you know about coming here today, or those typical transitions that we're using. Now, I'm not telling you you cannot do that. Of course, we would recommend that you try that, but that might not get you to where you need to get, because a lot of the times in these cases, because discovery happened first and they haven't disclosed, they're not in that disclosure process, they might not be ready or know how to start or what to say. So you might actually have to introduce the investigation or the folder in your topic of concern so that you can get someone talking. That doesn't mean that you don't give them an opportunity to do it themselves, but you can bring it up. So if they told you why they're there, that's the ideal, right? So you get them talking. Get them talking about everything from A to B to C, all the way through to the end of the alphabet, before, during, after, getting them everything about what happened in a narrative way, just like you would in a normal, everyday forensic interview. Okay? But sometimes that works and sometimes it doesn't. And so what's more typical in an evidence presenting case is that they're not going to do that, and you might have to introduce that. So you might want to say something like, part of the investigation we have going on right now has to do with a man named Johnson. You know, tell me everything you know about him, or tell me all about what you know about him, and get them talking. So you're not telling them, you're not leading them into telling them what happened, but you are acknowledging the topic, and the topic is this person. So again, a lot of times, oh, our USAs or our state's attorneys or our district attorneys aren't gonna let us say that, you know. And my question is, how come? You're not leading them and telling them what is the information that you want to hear from them. You're guiding them to a certain point. And more often than not, what I hear from interviewers across the country when I say this is like, well, they let me do it after the break. So after talking to them for 30 minutes aimlessly, at the break, they go, we'll go in there and ask them about their dad. And so the question is, if I can do it after the break, how come I can't do it at the beginning to get them talking? And usually just because of their own comfort, and because that's what they were told and they were taught, and that's the way it's always been done. So we're not going to do anything different. So I want you to think about that and know that you can do it without being leading. Another way to do it is, remember I told you I had this folder here that I might want to talk to you about later? Well, I'm going to bring it out now, and I want to talk about some of these chats. And you introduce it that way. Or remember I told you I had a folder here and I told you I had some pictures that I want to talk about? I want to talk about those pictures, but I want you to first tell me, when I say that, what does that make you think of? And maybe give them an opportunity to talk that way. Okay, so you're introducing the topic without telling them what to say. That's why it's not leading. Okay, it's allowing it to open the door to the conversation. If you say to a victim, I know that the police came to your house yesterday, tell me all about that, it's the same thing. I know that you saw the doctor before seeing me today, tell me all about that, it's the same thing. It's just that we get nervous about doing it differently because we have tangible evidence. When it's externally verifiable, our teams feel more comfortable with it. So just know that you can do that. So let's take a listen and what it might sound like.
Okay. Does he live out there or does he live at home? He lives out there?
Yeah, he doesn't drive, so
Okay.
couldn't get there.
Okay. And so you said your uncle went and picked up your sister. And what's your uncle's name?
Ben.
Ben. And what does your sister know about you coming here?
She doesn't.
She doesn't. Okay. What do you know about coming here?
Not much. Well, I mean, like, yeah.
Tell me what you know. Tell me what you understand and why you're here today.
I don't know how to, like,
Say it however you can, and then we'll go from there.
I got in contact with a bad person, and then, I don't know, like, my parents said, like, there was a lot of people involved, and, like, I don't know if you're trying to, like, they said they found him or something. I don't know much.
Okay, so there's a bad person, and that was in contact with you. And your parents said that there's a lot of people involved and looking for him, and maybe have found him. So tell me, who is this person?
Like,
His name?
Daniel?
Daniel? Okay, do you know about Daniel?
Not much.
Not much.
Like, he was on this website, and like, it's for like under 18, I think, or 21 or something like that. And I guess people had found out that he was older than that, and so there's like a whole bunch of different accounts by his name. And
Okay. And again, as we're talking about this, I just really want to tell you again that you're not in any trouble. Some of this stuff might not be the easiest to talk about, and that's okay. That's why we're in here talking, and that's why we do it this way. Okay.
And that's why your parents are upstairs, and it's just, you're gonna be talking in an adult, it's just about you and me and the people I work with, okay? So why don't you start at the beginning? You said that this guy Daniel was talking with you. Tell me how it all started. Tell me what you remember.
So
All right. So I was able to introduce, and I said probably what most of you was to tell me how come you're here today. And she was able to tell me. She was able to tell me what she knows. There's a couple things that I want to point out. The use of silence. So don't forget, silence is part of your interview that people often forget. So there's a wonderful article about 10 seconds of silence. I believe it's Deborah Poole who wrote it. And it talks about how if interviewers actually take 10 seconds of silence, more than likely the person you're talking to will begin to speak. That because we cut people off too early, we cut off their disclosure. So I don't know if you noticed my use of silence with her, and I stayed silent and allowed her to just tell me what she was thinking and be able to process how she wanted to say it. And I allowed her to do that. Some of the other things you might have picked up on is my reframing of her words. So she was using a lot of blaming of herself when she was talking about it. I came in contact with a bad man. I was doing this and I was doing that. I can tell from her speech, from her body language, that was really hard for her and that she really blamed herself for all these actions. So when I reframe things, I would talk about when he came in contact with you. And so my victim blaming language was really turned on in making sure that I was really careful about not putting any more blame on her than she was already placing on herself. Okay, so those are some things. Any other things that you guys picked up on? I'm shivering of cold. So if you guys hear that in my voice, just so you know, it's just absolutely freezing in here and I don't know why. So if you hear me shivering, that's why. What else did you guys pick up on? Anything at all? Or any questions about it? Did it feel very different than what you guys might be doing? Some yes and no's in there would be great. Does it feel very different, or did it sound very different than what you guys already might be doing? Yes or no in the chat. It sure does. Okay. It sure does feel different or feel the same. Different. Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
I think the platform seems to be very similar as far as the rapport building and the narrative transitions and the segue into the active disclosure.
Mm-hmm.
I think some of our group are still trying to wrap our brains around the introduction of evidence. Our model doesn't allow the introduction of evidence, so this is all new for many of us. But it's interesting to see how you guys do it. It's just quite a different way of how we do it over here.
Yeah, yeah. And so when you say your model doesn't allow for it, tell me more. Tell me what you mean by that.
Well, the model doesn't encourage it. There's allowances for it. And through working with our prosecutors, it's not something that we typically would normally introduce evidence. We frame questions a little bit differently to try and hopefully make them seem less confrontational. We'll, for example, we'll say, I heard that you might have gone to the doctors. Maybe you can tell me about that. Well, not maybe, but tell me more about that.
Mm-hmm.
Trying to be as open-ended as possible, then focusing more towards a topic that leads us down the road of a hopeful disclosure or a reference to, if the hospital visit was the point of concern and they never mention it, and the team has talked about it, kind of a last resort for us would be to bring that into the conversation during the interview. Say, oh well, we work with a team, and I had heard from whoever that you went to the hospital recently. Tell me more. Tell me more about that, in hopes that that'll jog something loose. But that even that it's a stretch for us to do that. We're trying to get at that in different ways, but just the different models are interesting to compare and contrast. So it's still trying to wrap my brain around everything.
Yeah. And thank you for taking the time to explain that for me. And I think that it's what you're saying to me is not uncommon to many interviewers around the country that I talk with. And a lot of it is you are allowed to do it. And you're allowed to do it because you just told me you are. And you might have, what your prosecutors are telling you is to wait to do it after, but you can do it. And so if you just allow them to know that you know some information from the get-go, you don't have to introduce it necessarily. So if you say to them, tell me how come you're here today, then they're like, I don't know. And they say, well, tell me what you do know. I don't know, my mom just told me I had to come here and talk to you. Okay, talk to me about what? I don't know. How long will that have to go on before you're allowed to say, well, I know you went to the doctor, talk to me about that. So I understand that you talked to a teacher about things that happened to you. Let's tell me all about that. Or I understand that the police came to your house yesterday. Tell me about that. You would actually probably transition to that a lot sooner if the kid wasn't talking. The kid is talking and tells you that the police came to the house yesterday. You don't have to do that. And that's the same with what we're doing with presenting evidence. It just feels different because we're acknowledging it from the front end. So by just acknowledging that we have a folder, it makes it easier to bring it up later. So if you're talking to someone for 20, 30 minutes, and you're asking questions that you know the answers to, and you don't say anything, then when it comes down to bringing it up, you're like, well, you knew about that whole time and you've been asking me these questions and you didn't even tell me. So when you're working with a 7-year-old, it might not be as big of a deal, but when you start working with teenagers and you're not upfront with them from the beginning, they might be a little bit more difficult to deal with. And the trust factor is a little bit different too. And so they're thinking like, what was the past 20 minutes all about? And so those are the types of things we try to get our MDTs to think about. And if we can just prove that the model's the same and it's not leading and it's still as pure of an interview protocol as possible, then your MDTs will be a little bit more accepting of it as well. And I take you back, and I think you were the one who asked the question earlier about the NICHD protocol. That is the most researched protocol in the world. And they, in their scripted responses, allow for that. So if the most researched protocol on forensic interviewing allows for it, why does your state's attorneys or I don't know if you have DAs, I can't remember if they're DAs or state's attorneys in Maine, but think that you can't do it. And so that's really good research stuff to look at and present to them when you're talking about MDT responses. Okay, and that's something else we can talk about at a different time too, if you wanted to do that, some MDT responses and getting your MDT on board. All right, let's look at, so in that example I just gave you, I didn't present anything. I asked her, just like you normally would, tell me how come you're here today, and she talked to me. This is an example of having to introduce the investigation because they don't know why they're there.
Well, part of the investigation that we have going on right now is regarding a man named Bentley.
He was a man that my mom met on the internet. And that he was a nurse and my mom wanted to meet up with him. He had my mom do some stuff that she kind of regrets. first interaction with him was kind of a pleasant thing, but then as kind of my mom talking to him and went on, in order to understand and my mom to be with him, I had to do some things.
Who was it that told you about that? In order for your mom to be with him, you had to do something.
I had to understand what needs to go through and stuff.
Okay. You explain that to your Dalton or your mom? Okay. What she said so that I know.
Basically put it as there are some things that I gotta do for me. For us to be with him.
So again, she introduced the topic of concern by saying part of the investigation we have is about a man named Dalton, but she didn't say we're doing an investigation about Dalton who abused you and made your mom do things to you. She didn't say what the investigation, she didn't tell him what to say. All she said was this is an investigation having to do with a man named Dalton, and he went into disclosure. That's what allowed him to know why they were there. So it would be very different if she said, part of the investigation we're here is about named Dalton because of what he did to you and what he had your mom do to you, and because he made you get naked in front of your mom and she had to bathe you and you had to breastfeed from her and all that stuff. We wouldn't do that, right? But you're able to introduce it to allow for the disclosure process to occur. And if he doesn't want to go there, he doesn't go there. There's no forcing that to happen, okay? So I think it's really important to hear it. So you hear that what we're doing when we're talking about it, it might feel like it might be leading, and you could understand why some people might be concerned with what it's leading, but when you hear it actually play itself out, you see that it's not. And it's actually a very helpful process for that victim to be able to disclose, especially when they haven't disclosed before. In that particular case, he didn't even know why he was coming in. His mother was arrested that day, and they had found even more evidence than what they were really expecting to find. And so he didn't even know that anyone knew what was going on. So he wouldn't have been able to go to tell me how come you're here today because he had no idea. So that would have been a really long and painful interview for him if we hadn't introduced the evidence the way she did. Okay, so the time will come during the interview process where you might want to introduce that folder and introduce the information that's in there. So the part of prepare and predict is we prepare them for what they're about to see and hear, and so they can predict it, right? Prepare them so they can predict. So there's a description of the process that takes place. And it could be really wordy or not so wordy. You can be like, remember that folder I told you I have with photos? I'm going to show those to you now. And that can be enough of the preparing part, or it can be more wordy to something like this. So I'm going to look, the way I show photos is I'm going to look at this photo. I'm going to tell you everything I can about it. And then when you're ready, I'm going to show you the photo and ask you to tell me everything you can about it. That's more wordy than, okay, I'm going to look at a photo now and let me know. And when you're ready, I'm going to show it to you. And then when you tell me about it. So you see what I'm saying? So there are different levels of description that can take place. But I'm going to show you examples of some of them. And then you find your own style in your art. So if I were to ask Emily how she does it, it's going to be different than the way Carly does it and the way I do it. It's all going to be a little bit different. So
Allie, we have a quick question in the chat about that last video.
Oh,
It says, if he didn't go into disclosure, would she, the interviewer, then present more evidence?
potentially, yeah. So if he wouldn't have gone in and talked about who he was, she could have gone in and, said she had photos or, something to that effect. So absolutely. Because the purpose is to see what the victim can tell us about what happened. But if he wasn't, even with that, if he wasn't able to go there, she wouldn't have pushed any further. And it would be just a matter of letting him know that we're here to talk when he's ready. So, yeah. And you'll see a little bit more of it so you can see how that works and how it plays out. When you're describing what you have in your folder, it's really important that you don't quantify how much you have. So you don't want to say, I have a folder in here, and in this folder I have 3 photos and that I want to show you. And the reason we don't do that is because you may not show all 3. You might actually go into take your break and bring in another image, and now you have 4. By talking to them, you might not show any. By talking to them, you might realize the pictures that you have in this folder are not of that person, or they're not relevant to this person, and you're going to choose not to show them. Lots of reasons of why you may not actually have 3 photos and show 3 photos. Also, you don't want to tell them that it's everything that you guys have, because like Emily was talking about, when you're preparing, you might have 100 photos, but what you bring into that room might be 3. So you don't want to say that you only have 3 photos, because there's a lot more. And it's important for them to know that you've seen it. So, or that you know about it. So when you're working with child exploitation victims, one of the things you need to know is that they often don't tell until they know that you know. So if they think you only have 3 photos, they're like, oh, well, she must not have the videos, so I'm not going to tell her about the videos. And so it's limiting what they will and will not tell you. Okay, so you just want them to know that you have the photos, and so there's no limitations to what they can share. You want to let them know that you have information, you just don't want to limit how much information they can share with you about that. Does that make sense? Okay, so let us look at an example of that. Okay, so this is just what we are about to do. Okay, the description of the process.
About the same. Okay. Well, you did say that it would be easier for you to kind of, when you were talking with the other detectives, kind of when you looked at some pictures, it kind of helped you remember certain things. And I do have some pictures, and the way I show pictures, it might be the same as the way the detectives did it, may be different. But the way I show pictures is I have like a number on the back of it. The number is really for me to make sure that I know what I'm showing, and it helps me give a name to the picture. So you don't have to worry so much about the number, but then I'll look at the picture and I'll tell you what I see. And when I'm done, when you're ready, I'll have you look at it and you can tell me everything about it.
Okay.
Okay?
All right, so that's the description of the process. And what's really, really important too is when I tell her it's her turn, I don't want her to tell me what she sees, like I'm doing. I want her to tell me what she knows. Because if I say to her, I'm going to look and tell you what I see, and then I want you to look at the picture and tell me what you see, she's going to describe the photo just like I did. Okay, and we don't need her to describe it, we can see it. We need her to give us a description of the event that took place. Okay, so just the wording that we use is really important to elicit that disclosure. So after we've described that process, now we're going to show the evidence. So you might say something like, okay, so I'm about to show you photo number 1. In photo number 1, I see what appears to be a girl in a room with blue walls. There's a picture of the beach on the wall, and she has brown hair and is sitting on the bed. She has a t-shirt on with no pants, but I have that part covered up with a sticky note. So if you're sanitizing, that's how you would acknowledge the sanitized sticky part. So I'm telling her she has no pants on. I know that she doesn't have any pants on, and I can see that, but that part's covered up with a sticky note. So she knows what's underneath it. Okay. I'm not judging her. I'm not judging the picture. I'm just telling her what I see free of judgment. So now I'm going to show you that picture, and I want you to look at this photo and tell me everything you can about it. Okay, so that goes back to what I just said. Don't say, I want you to look at the picture and tell me what you see. When you tell me everything you can about it, tell me when you're ready. And I want to say, tell me when you're ready instead of, are you ready? Because they can say no and then never look at it. But if I say, tell me when you're ready, it gives them that control as to when, how, and when I show it to them. So sometimes they'll be like, well, I'm not ready yet. Okay, well, tell me what you need to help you be ready. And you talk about it versus giving them a yes, no response where they could just say no and shut you down. So the tell me when you're ready opens it up for further discussion. Okay. So let's look at what that looks like.
So picture number 1 is of a girl, and this girl is standing on a couch. The couch has kind of like a checkered pattern, or like a plaid pattern, I guess, better said. Behind her, there's a painting on the wall. I can see a lamp on a little table, and I think there's a window right behind her too. I can't tell if that's a window, but it looks like a window. She doesn't have any clothes on. She's got long brown hair, and she's just standing there looking straight forward. Okay, and that's pretty much what I can see in this picture.
Okay.
Tell me when you're ready and I'll show.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay.
So remember the prepare and predict process. So the reason I'm describing it is I want her to picture it in her head before I actually show her the picture. Oftentimes by the description of what I see, it'll get them to disclose before I've been having to show it. Okay, so it happens a lot if you do it correctly that you have them. So I describe the picture just like you heard, and they're like, oh yeah, that's me, and that's in my living room, and blah, blah, blah. And they start talking all about it. And then, so people will say, well, if they've talked about it, do you have to show it? And so showing it has a purpose. So if the purpose was to identify this event, then the answer is yes, because I want to make sure that what she just disclosed to me is what she was just talking about. Sometimes, because I'm describing something and things have happened multiple times, they'll describe an event that's not the one in the picture. So by showing the picture after for clarification purposes, like, oh, that's not the time I just talked about, that's another time. And now what you've gotten is 2 chargeable offenses on 2 separate occasions versus the one time that may have been thought of just because you had the one picture. So there's a purpose behind showing it. Now, if it was just to get her to talk, to facilitate a disclosure, then no, then you don't have to. So you have to remember what your purpose is behind showing it, okay? All right. So again, this is the process. You describe the process of what you're about to do, and explain what she's about to hear, we'll see or hear if I'm going to read something, and what's going to happen next. And that's when you show it. Okay, so let's practice. Can I have a very, very brave volunteer who will take themselves off of mute and look at this picture and tell me how you would describe the process of what you're about to do, not the picture, but the process about what you're about to do. Can I have a volunteer? No one's expecting it to be perfect either, but the best way to learn is to practice. Anyone? Anyone? Bueller? Wow. Okay.
Okay. All right, I'll go. I'll be brave. So you want to hear what I would say or just the process?
I want you to describe the process that you're about to do with her, not tell her what, don't describe the picture. I want you to describe the process. Remember how you're going to tell her what you're about to do.
Okay, so I would be looking at the picture and I would tell her that I have a picture here, and then I would describe what I see in the picture. And then I'm going to say, when you're ready, I'm going to show you the picture and I want you to tell me everything about this picture.
Yes, exactly. So like I told you before, I have this folder, and in this folder I have some pictures, and the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to look at the picture and tell you what I see, and when you're ready, I'm going to show it to you. Exactly. I mean, that's exactly what you just said. Now take it to that next step. And now I want you to describe the photo to her before you show it.
Okay.
Photo number one.
Okay. So I have a picture here of two females. There's an adult female and a child. They appear to be outside somewhere in nature. It looks like there's some trees in the background. The child appears like she might be crying or yelling. Her mouth is open, and the adult female is kind of holding her, has one hand on her head and one hand across her collarbone. Let me know when you're ready to see this picture.
Great job. So yeah, and so what you did here was you didn't actually place judgment. You didn't make assumptions. You said she might be screaming or she might be yelling or saying something. She has her mouth open. Okay. You did a wonderful job of saying that she's outside. It's an adult woman with an adult child, or with an adult female with a female child. And that's really great. I mean, you really described it. The other thing you can do, you can disclose the clothing or the watch. There's lots of different things you can describe. You don't have to describe every detail either, but there's lots of different things you could have chosen. So maybe somebody would have looked at this picture and been like, I have a picture and it's a woman and a child, and she's wearing a blue denim shirt, and the child's wearing a white t-shirt. The woman has some glasses on and she has a pink watch. They're outside and I can see trees and grass in the background. Let me know when you're ready to see it. So that's just as acceptable as what you said, right? But you did a wonderful job, and thank you for volunteering. I really appreciate it. All right. Now, one of the things that either Carly or Emily said earlier, and I can't remember who it was, but that we don't really show videos. It's very, very rare that we're going to show a video to a victim, and there's lots of different reasons for that. The investigative reason is that it's a moving object. So when you want someone to describe something to you or point something out, if you're watching a video, by the time they say, see that right there, you have to stop, rewind, pause, fast forward, rewind, pause until you get to that same point. And it's a very lengthy process. It's very complicated. The victim-centered reasons is that the child has already lived that scenario out. They've already experienced it. We don't want to make them relive it again by showing them a video. We also don't know how they're going to react to the sounds and to hearing things for a second time. It could be triggers that we're not prepared for. So that's really important. The other thing to remember is using a still from a video or a screenshot from a video allows for that victim to identify themselves one time instead of for 3 minutes. Okay. And so if I have a video that 3 minutes, you can see her face. The law enforcement can create a still shot of just her face and have her identify it. Once it's her identified and there's no other people in the video, it's her throughout the entire video. You don't need to show her all the other things. You acknowledge the video. You acknowledge that you've seen the video. You acknowledge if there's voices or instruction. You explain to her the length of it, but you don't have to show her the whole thing. Okay, so I'm about to show you a picture that was created from a video. I call it a still shot. Do you know what that means? And if they say yes, you have them just tell you what it means. If they say no, you describe it for them. The video has a person in it who has no clothes on, and I can see female body parts. This person has long black hair and is laying on their stomach on a bed that has orange sheets on it. The still shot from the video is what I call image number 3. I want you to look at this image and tell me everything you can about it and tell me when you're ready. So it's very similar to showing a picture, but I acknowledge that there's a video. The other thing I can say is I'm about to show you a picture that we created from a video. The video is 30 seconds long. And in that video, there's just one person, but that person moves from one room to another room. And during that video, person is fully dressed and then they're undressed. What we did was we created this still shot, and the shot I want to show you is number 3. So when you're ready, I want you to take a look at it and tell me everything you can about this video. Tell me when you're ready. So that's just another option of how to do it. So there's not one strict way to do it. There's multiple different ways to do it, but always letting them know it's a video and not a picture. Does that make sense? So, oh, I might not be able to play it. I'm sorry, you guys. I don't know what's going on here with the video and stuff. But so, how many of you have seen the Linda Listen video? This little boy. Anyone? Has anyone seen it?
Come on, guys. Linda, listen.
Okay. So Kat has seen it. Lori has. Shannon. Okay. So it's a fun video. And what I was going to do is I was going to share it with everyone. But since you 3 wonderful people have said that you've seen it, and then so you know what I'm talking about. So this video is a little boy. I want to say he's like 3. Okay. And he's talking to his mom, Linda. And he's like, Linda, listen to me. You're not listening to me. And she's trying to talk to him. She's like, what? She's like, and he stops her and he's like, Linda, listen to me. You're not listening to me. And this is him talking to his mom. And it's really hilarious and it's really cute and all that wonderful stuff. I was going to have you all watch it so you know what's in the video. And then we were going to create a still shot, which is this. Okay. So this is the still shot from that video. So who was the person who just volunteered for us? I didn't see who it was that was speaking.
That was me, Jen.
Jen, okay. So how about Kat, Lori, or Shannon? Since you've seen it, can one of you, because you've seen the video, it might be easier, can you describe the still from the video?
You just want the still shot described?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm seeing on the screen, I would say that I'm going to show you a still shot of a little boy who's wearing a green t-shirt. He has something on the t-shirt, but I can't quite see what it is. And he's wearing blue jeans. His hands are behind his back and his eyes are shut. And he looks like he's standing in a room with a tiled floor.
Excellent. That's a great description. Now describe the video. So remember, it's still from a video. So how would you explain to the person who's looking at it that that's still what that video came from? That still came from.
So it's been a little while since I've seen the video, but from what I recall,
I think that I would say that this is taken from a video where this child is speaking to his mom and begging and pleading. I can't remember all of it, but it was quite funny.
That's exactly right. So, so thank you so much for volunteering. I kind of voluntold you, but thank you so much for your willingness. But that's exactly right. So I'm going to show you a still shot of this boy. The boy in this still shot is a young boy. He's got a green t-shirt on. He's got some blue jeans. His eyes are shut. And this is taken from a larger video. That video is of this boy talking to his mom. And he's begging his mom to listen to him, or whatever it is that you decide to say about it. And that's all we can see in the video is him talking to his mom. And there's times in the video you could hear his mom talking to him, but you can't see her, right? So like those are things that you can say. You don't have to say all those words, but those are things that you can say. So that is a description of a video still. So it's slightly different than just the photo because there's more information that goes along with it. But there's still a beginning, a middle, and an end. There's still something that happened before that video was taken that you want to know about. There's still things that happen after that video that you don't know about. And so you're still going to do your good forensic during and after. Headless and faceless genitalia is a little bit different. So we've talked about how we don't really generally sanitize unless we have to. If I'm going to show a picture of someone of a headless vagina, and I don't know it's them for sure, I'm going to do what I can to sanitize it. Or if I'm going to see a selfie in a mirror and it's just that there's no head, it's just the body, I'll probably sanitize those body parts because I don't want to expose someone else to another picture of a victim, kind of what Carly said earlier. So Carly talked about how she was talking to a victim and the victim didn't identify herself in the original neutral image. And the next image she had was a more explicit image and she wasn't sure if it was the right person, so she covered it up with Post-it notes. Can you show them your folder, Carly, and show them what you're doing with the Post-it notes?
Oh, sure. So call me Vanna White here, if everyone can see. So typical kind of like manila folder that you're going to bring in with you. So you can see these are just hotel tax exempt forms that I'm just throwing in here. But so pretend that they're my images that I'm bringing in. So they're going to be sitting like that. And when I have my folder in front of me like this, I'm going to open it like towards me, being careful of the camera angles and things like that. And then you'll see right on the inside of my folder here, I just have Post-it notes. So that way it's just really quick and easy for me to grab one and go ahead and put it right on the image right before I'm going to show it to whoever I'm interviewing.
Mm-hmm. So you might go into the interview already with it already on the photos because you know that you're going to go in there with a sanitized photo. But in the moment, you could always sanitize. Sometimes you chose not to sanitize, but the person's like, you know, I just don't really want to see the whole thing. I'll look at my face, but not the whole thing. So you can choose to put some Post-it notes over the rest of the picture. You can fold the picture. Sanitize in the moment.
And Allie, you know what? I just wanted to add something. Sometimes sanitation of a photo doesn't necessarily take place with a Post-it, right? Sometimes you can go in there with a piece of evidence and the kid's like, I just don't want to see it. Mm-hmm. And you can say, okay, I'd like to try and describe it for you. And then you let me know if you want to see it, because you still want them to be able to identify themselves in some way or format. And the kid may have already talked about that photo. They may not have, but by you describing it, you're giving them another opportunity to be able to talk about it. I actually had instances where kids have said, I don't want to look at it now, but we talk. And then they're like, you know what, that photo that you were telling me about that I didn't want to see, can I see it again? Because it's almost a cue to different types of evidence or different types of allegations that they haven't been able to talk to me about just yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's a great point. Just like we don't force victims to disclose, we don't force victims to view images. So if they don't want to see it, we're not going to force them. Okay, and that's something really important to know. So we're not going to force a disclosure. We're not going to force somebody to look at anything that we have in our folder. If they say, I don't want to look at it, I wouldn't just be like, okay, and that's it, I would ask how come. Sometimes it's just that, like, I'm just not ready yet. Okay, well, let's talk about something else. And when you're ready, you let me know and we can do that. Or, I just, I don't have to see it because I know what it is and they want to describe it to you. Or, can I just look at the face only? Or, something to that effect. And so just like a 4-year-old who says to you in the interview room, I want to leave the room, I want to go see my mommy. You're not going to be like, okay, let's go see your mommy and walk out. You're going to be like, how come? What's going on? You're going to ask questions about it. Same thing with this. So don't forget to use your really great forensic interviewing skills and asking how come, and have them explain to you the reason behind they say something. A little way I might sanitize a selfie. So like pretend this girl's naked, but I might sanitize it. I don't see the face. I don't know exactly who it is. And there's really nothing in it that's like, there's no like tattoo, there's no like birthmark, there's no scar, there's really nothing that can really tell me for sure that's her. But there's so many other things in the picture to identify. So I can still show it, sanitize it, and still have her talking about the dog, the TV, the mirror, the wall, the closet, the window, like so many different things. Okay. And so we don't want to limit ourselves to just one thing. We can do a lot more with it. And just no, obviously we want them to say that's me. We want them to be like, oh yeah, that's me, and they tell you everything about it. But that doesn't always happen. That's not always the first thing that they say. But as long as they're talking, that's good. So you want them to tell you things that are specific to what they would know if they were there, just like any other kind of crime. So when you're talking to them about a time when they were sexually abused and they're telling you, they're giving you a description of their room, and they would only know that if they were in their room, or they're giving you a description about their offender, and they would only know those things if it really truly took place to them. Same with these pictures. So tell me about the room. Tell me all about it. Tell me about how the photo was taken. And getting them talking about all that different stuff will sometimes lead to, yes, that's me. And sometimes, even if they don't say that, they've given you enough information to know it's them. Avoid yes, no questions. Ask your open-ended questions. Get them to give you narratives. You want narrative responses. Don't forget to use a 10-second silence rule. Like, do all your great forensic interviewing skills that shouldn't be taken away just because you have a piece of evidence. Sometimes showing evidence might trigger the response to something else, a photo. And before you show the photo, they're like, well, I'm going to talk to you about something else. So listen to what that might sound like.
All right. I've got some pictures that I want to show you. I don't know if you do know about pictures. Are you aware of some or not any? Not really. No. Sit a little bit closer to you just so I can show you. The pictures that I want to show you, I'm going to describe to you first, just so that you kind of can wrap your brain around what you're about ready to see. Okay. Okay. The first picture is a female, and there's a burgundy nightgown on. That she's laying on a couch, brown suede maybe couch with a patchwork quilt in the picture and like a patchwork pillow. She's got her arm around her head. There's no body parts exposed because the nightgown covers it. Okay. Mm-hmm. Do you have any questions about the picture before I show you?
Okay. I'm gonna go off on a little bit of a tangent.
No, sure.
I've always been curious what drinking alcohol.
She goes, I want to go on a tangent. And Amy's like, okay. She puts the folder away and allows the victim to talk. And that's great. Like, this part of the prepare and predict process. You're allowing them to prepare for all this stuff, and it might trigger another memory or might trigger another response. So she doesn't say, wait, no, don't tell me about that now. I want to show you this picture first. She says, okay, tell me what you need to tell me. This is about you, not about what I had a plan to do. There's no, nothing like that. And then eventually, if she has to show it, she shows it. Maybe she doesn't end up having to show it, depending on the situation. Okay, so don't be afraid of that. Use the questions for question and clarification. Use the evidence. So there's going to be, like, maybe the victim was describing this blue, and so you want to show this picture for clarification. Like you were talking about Johnny's blue car. I have a picture here of a black car, and I want you to look at it and tell me everything you can about it. And maybe you show it, oh yeah, it was the black car. Like he had a blue car and then they sold it and they got a black car. And now they're telling you about that. Or they'll look at it and be like, I don't know whose car that is. Okay, don't be afraid. Don't think it's going to be suggestive just because you're showing something. Just showing something doesn't make someone give you the answer that you want. Okay, so that's kind of what you've learned here. Like showing an evidence or using evidence or talking about externally verifiable information doesn't force someone to tell you what's in your brain. They're gonna share with you what they want to share and what happened to them. And I think that's really, really important. But you can get time frame, you can get venue, you can get other victims and witnesses, you can get other perpetrators. You want to maximize the amount of information, accurate information you can get, while minimizing any negative emotional impact to that victim. Okay, be observant of their reactions. If showing a picture, they look at it and then they move back, recognize they don't have to stare at it any longer. They've looked at it and you can put it away in your folder and still talk. Acknowledge their nonverbals as much as their verbals. So all of that is still good forensic interviewing skills that you would normally do. None of that has changed. So I'm going to show you another clip, and we're running short on time.
So the next picture I want to show you is picture 7. And picture 7 is of a girl. And I know it's a girl. She's got long light brown hair. And she's wearing a diaper. And you can see her from behind, and she's standing in a bathroom. I can see the corner of the bathtub and a bath mat, and maybe something pink in the right-hand corner. I don't know what that is, but it's something pink. I can see the floor, and then going, the door is open, and I can see the wood floor in the hallway. Okay, so I'm going to show you picture number 7, and when you're ready, I want you to tell me everything you can about it.
I'm ready.
Okay.
That was not my grandmother's house, and I don't know who that is. Hold up. Well, that might be me actually, because when my hair's wet, it gets brown. Like it's like a light brown because my hair was originally blonde. Then I dyed it red when I was older.
Oh. Okay.
And then I changed it back to blonde.
Okay.
And that was not at my grandmother's house because I don't remember her because her tub's like on that way, like closer to the kitchen, and the toilet's over there and the sink's over there. And
so whose bathroom is that?
I believe it's our old one, one that we lived with Chris.
Okay.
And I believe that's me.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say I was. Oh, I think that's a towel, and that's probably my little toilet when I was younger.
Was your little toilet when you were younger? What color was that?
What?
What color was it?
I think the top was like the seat part, and the back was purple, and the seat was pink.
Okay. Okay. And so you say that's you.
Yeah.
And you're in your bathroom that you think that was at the house where you lived with Chris?
Yeah.
At your old house? Yeah. And tell me about the diapers.
I don't think I was supposed to be in diapers when this was taken because I look like 5'6".
And how come you were in diapers?
I don't know.
Who put you in diapers?
That usually changes me into diapers. My mom or Chris, or my older sister Rebecca. When she.
But so you said you weren't in diapers anymore because you were 5 or 6. Yeah. So who, when you were 5 or 6, had you in diapers? And if you don't remember, tell me you don't remember. But if you do remember.
I don't remember. But I believe that is in our old house that we lived with Chris in.
Okay. But you don't know why you're in diapers even though you're 5 or 6 at the time?
No. And I believe that's me because when my hair's wet, it turns brown, like blondish.
So this first picture, picture number 1 that we already looked at, I'm going to show it to you again. Okay. Also, your sister's in a diaper. So tell me about who put you guys in diapers.
That usually put us in diapers when we were like older in these pictures. I remember Chris changing my sister in a diaper once when she was like, I would say 6, 7, and it was Chris.
Okay, so the reason I'm showing you this is this slide talks about enhancing the narrative. So what I felt when I was doing this was that she was a little reluctant to talk about herself being in a diaper. And I thought, well, maybe if I show again her sister in a diaper, she might be willing to talk about that. Because we know that sometimes when we take it off of themselves, somebody's sometimes more open to talking about it. And I felt like that's exactly what happened here. So she actually went into a disclosure about what she saw happen to her sister. And then she was more easily able to talk about what happened to her. And so I used the evidence to enhance that narrative to get her to talk about it and to make her feel that it was okay to talk about. And, you know, you don't have to push. And if she wouldn't have gone there, she wouldn't have gone there. And that would have been okay with me. But I tried an alternate route and that was able to get her to go there. So don't be afraid to use it in a creative way, as long as you're not forcing the subject on her. Okay. Anything anyone want to talk about that before I move on? All right. So we want you to prepare for the unexpected, okay? So we want you to be observant, like I said, of the victim's reactions. Go at the victim's pace. Allow them to ask questions about the picture if needed, or about the evidence that you're talking about. Show as much or as little, like Emily was talking about, is necessary. Don't limit yourself because you want to bring in less. Like someone was presenting at a conference and told people they should never bring more than 10 images or 10 pieces of evidence into a room. Again, I don't ever limit what you can and cannot do. Like you might have to bring in more than 10 things into the room. And I don't want you guys to think there's a hard, fast rule of an amount that you're not allowed to exceed, okay? Remember, one photo might be enough. So even if you have 50, you don't have to have 50 photos in the room with you. And remember why you're presenting it. Remember your purpose behind showing the evidence, talking about the evidence, reading the evidence, or discussing it, okay? Typical things that kids are gonna ask. What will my parents be told? Will my parents see the pictures? Who has seen the pictures? Have the pictures been sent online to anyone else? I don't want to see the images. I want to see all of the images. I want to see the picture alone. Don't describe them anymore to me, just show me them. Okay, so these are typical things that you might hear. They're very concerned about what their parents are going to see. So I always want to find out ahead of time what the parents have already seen prior to coming into the interview. And so I can be sure to let them know. If the parents have not seen the pictures, they don't necessarily have to see the pictures. And I actually encourage parents not to see these pictures because it's dramatic for them. And I can share that. In terms of who's seen the pictures, we can't know for certain who all has seen it, but we can talk about that only the people on the team that have to see it can see it. Prepared for that. Sometimes they want to see all of them. And so you have to talk with your team to make sure and find out if that's possible. And also, there are times when I'm like, you know what, I just want to be alone. And so that might happen. And the video's still rolling, they're looking at them. If that's what they need to do to be able to process this and be able to get through it and to be able to talk about it, that's okay. It's what the victim needs, okay? And that's why we're bringing in copies and not the originals too. So we always want to make sure that they're copies and they're not original things.
And Allie, I just wanted to share one more thing. Sometimes the kids will tell us, stop describing the pictures to me, show them to me. But you have to be careful with that too, because there's normal transitions in the way that we organize our evidence. So we may start with a more innocent photo of just their face and then move on to more explicit things. So what I will say is when a kid tells me that, it's like, I'm happy to do that, but I feel like I have to prepare you for the next picture that you're going to see, because this picture, the person doesn't have any clothes on, because I just don't want to take a photo out and like be like, bam, and there's that kid naked. So I just wanted to add that, Allie.
Yes, no, I'm glad that you said that. So if they don't want the full description, you don't have to do that, but it's probably best you prepare them if it's a naked photo of what they're about to see, so they're not blindsided and shocked in that sense, okay? And that's just being victim-centered. Know that they may not disclose, even though there's pictures of them, and because we have this evidence does not mean that you're going to automatically get a disclosure. There can be denials. You have to figure out what's best for your victim. The person in front of you is the most important person. So it's more important than the investigation, making sure that your victim's okay. You have to weigh whether they can continue to see more evidence, whether you have to stop, whether you have to do, come back and reconvene at a different time. All of those things you have to be able to do. But remember, you're going to be the one to defend the choices that you make in that interview to your team, but also in court. So you have to be confident in the decisions that you make and how you continue to do that. And if you're not confident in that, you shouldn't be doing it. So it's okay to have something and be like, you know what, I'm just not okay with that. I don't want to push her any further because I don't think that it's in the best interest of her. I know you need it for your investigation, but I have to do my role, and my role is doing what's best for the victim. And it's okay for you to say that and to do what you need to do for that. So hopefully, now that we're done with it, you have been able to identify when and how to present evidence effectively in the forensic interview, and you've learned about the art. And we've done it through identifying the stages of the FI and preparing for, what might happen and what may or may not occur. So here again is our contact information. Once again, it's wrong. I don't understand, Emily, what happened with that and how we didn't catch it before this. But please,
No worries.
Reach out to us, talk to us, consult with us. We will do the same with you. We want to make sure that you're understanding the process of this, so that if we come and do an interview at your CAC, or you're doing an interview where you might have to present evidence, you feel confident in the process and what you're doing.
And
go ahead.
Sorry. And guys, I again want to stress, I'm local. I'm very close to you. I am always happy to hop in my car and take a ride out, even if it's just to meet with interviewers and to talk about how we do our work, to kind of be a sounding board for each other. I really want to make sure that in this area, it's known that I want to be collaborative. I want to work with you guys. I want to be helpful where I can. And I also want you guys to be helpful to me where you can. I really, really appreciate being given the opportunity to be able to talk to you guys. I'm so glad that Allie and Carly were able to be with me, because the HSI Forensic Interviews, we are a very strong group in that we are very connected to each other. So we want to be, if I'm not here, my team is going to be just as helpful as I would be. Thank you so much again. Carly, did you want to add anything?
No, I think you pretty much nailed it. Just want to thank everyone again for letting, little old me from Minnesota jump on and be a part of the presentation and to meet everybody. Yeah, please ask questions. That's what we're here for. I know we went a little over, but yeah, thank you so much for allowing us to present to you guys today.
And thank you for being here. I know that this presentation sparked a lot of really good discussion, and there's a lot of great information in here about HSI's process. And thank you all for your time. And the recording and slides I'll send out as soon as I can get it all downloaded, figured out. So thanks so much for being here, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Annette, for being so patient with all of our technical.
No worries.
Take care, everybody. Enjoy your day.
Thank you.